With me is Maya Angelou, who came to Philadelphia today to speak at the Philadelphia Inquirer's Book and Author Luncheon. Maya Angelou lives an extraordinary life, which is chronicled in her series of autobiographical books, which begins with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Her fourth autobiographical volume has just been published under the title The Heart of a Woman. It begins in about 1957, when she is about 30, a single parent to her son Guy, who was born when she was 17 and unmarried. She described herself at the time as a club singer with more persistence than talent. After living in a beatnik community in the West Coast, she moved to New York, where she joined the Harlem Writers Guild, became inspired by the work of Martin Luther King, and eventually became the Northern Coordinator for SCLIC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Her struggles as a single parent were temporarily abated by her marriage to an African freedom fighter with whom she traveled around the world. People who you may know who figure into this autobiography include Billie Holiday, Max Roach, Abbey Lincoln, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. Maya Angelou has since written for television, served on the Commission of International Women's Year, where she was appointed by President Carter. Her volumes of poems include Just Give Me a Cool Drink of Water 'Fore I Die, and Oh Pray My Wings Are Gonna Fit Me Well, and I think the most recent is And Still I Rise. Welcome to Fresh Air, Maya Angelou. I very much enjoyed your new book. At that time when you were not only participating in but organizing actions, when there was an action that you and Abbey Lincoln and a few other women organized to be held in the UN after Lumumba was killed. And you had gotten some advice from your friend who had become your husband, who was an African freedom fighter.
Yes.
And part of the advice was to make sure when you do an action like that, that the people, the grassroots community, is behind you in it and aware of the fact that you're doing it. Can you tell us how you use that, and if you thought that is good advice?
Yes, it's excellent advice. It wasn't so that they would necessarily be with us, because we didn't really expect them to come down to United Nations, but so that they would know what we were doing and why we were doing it. So we wanted a demonstration at United Nations to say that black people protested the murder of Patrice Lumumba. So we went on 125th and 7th Avenue. We spoke in front of Mr. Michaud's bookstore and let the people know that we were going down. Well, maybe if we got done in, at least the people in Harlem or somebody would say, well, they were killed because they were trying to do something for us. At least we would just be there and sort of be knocked out, and nobody would know why. Well, of course, it seemed about a tenth of Harlem came down. There were thousands of people down at United Nations. We'd expected at most 50. There were thousands of people. We were thrown. There was Rosa Guy, Abbey Lincoln, and I, in particular, we three. We had an organization we had founded called C.O.W.S, Cultural Association of Women of African Heritage. It's quite a mouthful, but we had hoped to be the cultural arm of any organization meant to make the country better than it was. And so we'd gotten our few members and some of their men, some of their husbands or lovers or friends or whatever, and a few friends who weren't attached. And we had expected 50. And when we got out of the taxis and saw those thousands of people milling about, we were really undone. We rose to the occasion because what choice did we have? But the truth is we were shaking in our boots. It was quite a flamboyant demonstration and successful. Obviously, Mr. Lumumba could not be brought back, so that was... But I mean, successful in that there was a great many people knew that black Americans were not casual or uncaring about the murder of Patrice Lumumba as a result of that. So that Africans began, after that, to say that black Americans care about Africa. And that was the first demonstration of its sort, to say that. I think.
There was some other advice you got that you applied in the same action, and it was that if you ever really need help, particularly in a spot like that, to take someone who's really streetwise, maybe even a hoodlum, and ask for his assistance as opposed to a middle-class black person.
Yes. Well, that's true.
And maybe you could describe for us the situation that you did it and how it worked out, and I'll tell you my reaction afterwards.
A friend, a young man, Carlos Moore, who was a Cuban, had been very instrumental in getting some of the people into the United Nations before we sort of stood up and were counted, literally and figuratively. And when we came out, I heard that he told me, let's go to the Belgian embassy, Belgian consulate. We went, and when I arrived, I was told that Carlos had been in there and it was on the 11th floor, I believe, that he had been in there for a half hour, and no one knew what was happening to him. Well, I thought somebody has to go in. And rather than ask anybody to do something, I'd rather do it, especially if it's dangerous or very hard work. I'd rather do it myself. But I needed someone to go with me, and I thought of what my husband told me. He said, if you're ever in danger, never go to a middle class, a bougie. And he's South African. Xhosa, he is. Pan-African Congress. He said, go to a tsotsi, which was the name in Xhosa for a thug. He said, he will know that he has nothing to lose. And if he agrees to go with you, he will go all the way. So I looked around on the street for the person who looked most like, that. There was a man who had scars, running everywhere except in his eyes. Just, he had been brutalized, and he had a mean look on his face. And I said, excuse me, brother, but my name is Maya, and little Carlos is in this building, and I want to go in, and I need somebody to go with me. Will you go? He said, sure, let's go. He didn't wonder what would happen to him. We went in, the place was teeming with police. There were police outside, there were riot squads and everything, all white. And we went in, and the policeman with lots of badges and brass asked where we were going. And I had seen on the directory that there was a book company on the 10th floor. So I said, we're going to that book company. And the policeman asked this tsotsi, and he said, I'm with her. I'm going as far as she goes, all the way. He was wonderful to me because we got locked out in the fire escape, the inner fire escape, and the doors were locked, and I panicked. And he told me, Sister Maya, you don't have anything to worry about. He said, they have to walk over my dead body to get to you. You just stay right here. And, he just took over. And, it showed me a number of things. I learned a number of things from that. One, that it is wiser, late to learn it, but it is wiser to be a bit more prepared if you're going to risk your life. And never to risk anybody else's life. I was very embarrassed that I had, by my silliness, risked that man's life. I also learned that there is a level of courage which is so automatic that trumpets do not go off. Rhetoric is not, doesn't come into the voice, that great speech that I shall do this. The man just said, you have nothing to worry about. They have to walk over my dead body to get to you. And when we got out into the street, and I said, oh, I want to thank you, and I apologize, and I want to tell my husband how good you were. And he said, just tell him there was a black man who was ready to go the distance with you, that's all. And he just sort of merged back into the crowd.
I found that a really amazing story.
Yeah.
And asked myself if I would ever do anything like that, though I haven't ever been in quite that position anyways. But there was a moment in it when you're in the stairway and the doors are locked on either end and you can't really get out, and you're expecting that people will open the door and maybe shoot you.
That's right.
And then the person who you had asked to accompany you turned toward you. And, I mean, your writing was very excited at this point, and I was prepared for something to happen. And when he turned to you, I said to myself, oh, I hope he doesn't attack her.
Yeah.
Is he going to rape her? Is she now going to become his victim? And I got really scared for you in that moment. And obviously I had no reason to, because everything was under control. But is that the kind of thing that you would ever think about, or if you were in that position again, or do you think that...
Oh, no, because the life was at stake, both his life and mine.
Right, so that would have been a really
No.
stupid thing to...
I wouldn't have ever thought that, no. I wouldn't have been surprised at the moment if he had turned and said, how could you have, gotten me involved in something as stupid and dangerous as this?
Right.
I mean, if he had put me down, that wouldn't have surprised me, because when I came to myself after the panic subsided, I put my own self down. So that wouldn't have surprised me. But what did surprise me was the ease with which he showed his generosity and his courage.
It's a great story. You went to talk to Malcolm X afterwards to see what advice he'd have on what to do next, now that all these people had been mobilized. What did you think of his politics, which were considerably different from Martin Luther King's politics?
Yes. Well, I had really expected him to say, well, great, what we were concerned about, of course, was that the black people had shown by coming in such numbers that they were really furious in Harlem. And so we thought, since neither Abby, Rosa Guy, nor I, or any of the other women in our group knew what to do with this sort of large amount of anger and mobilization, we thought we would talk to Malcolm, and he would say, okay, we'll take them and tell them what to do. Sort of take over the responsibility. And he said, no. He said, we are Muslims. Muslims do not send black women and black men and black children down to face the guns and the dogs. We do not do that. And we were so disappointed. But he said, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Tomorrow, every black leader of your middle-class leader, every member of the middle-class leadership will put you down. They will say that you're a communist, or you do not represent the mood in the black society, black communities. And he said, but we will not do so. I will not join that brigade. The next day it was absolutely true. We were called radicals who really did not understand what was at stake, and all sorts of ridiculous things. And Malcolm said that what that action, that demonstration proved was that white Americans had better understand that it was time now for ballots or bullets, and that was a very real demonstration that came out of the heart of black America. So we were partly pacified, but he was a staunch Muslim at the time, and really his politics were intertwined with his religion, and they simply could not be separated at that time.
I guess he was familiar with being denied by other leaders and being called too radical and atypical of the mood of the people.
Right.
Give me some of that thug. Yeah, that's like that. Hit him in the chest with it. One time again in the head. With Buddy Roll, y'all. Check it out. I don't know what this world's gonna be, but I know one thing, that this is the life for me. Baby, 'cause I'm a thug. Oh, baby. Baby, 'cause I'm a thug. Wouldn't change for the world. 'Cause I'm a thug. That's right. Baby, 'cause I'm a thug. Yeah, check it out. Could it be my baggage?
Every day is Saturday night. I'm black and I'm dangerous. The worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T. Renegade, Katherine, Massey, Book Club, context of White Supremacy. Another week, another session, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people on what the system of white supremacy racism is, how it works, what we can do to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Today's date, Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. So I have been told. This is our 5th installment on Dr. Maya Angelou's The Heart of a Woman. We are picking up right towards the end of chapter 10, where she was talking about how much she worked to clean the house and cook and everything to satisfy Vu's last week, right towards the end of chapter 2. The audio 1, we are deliberately playing Trick Daddy and with the words, specifically because of the interview that you heard. I didn't even go with the instrumental, with the words. There it is. I don't know either. I know one thing. These privileged black males do some raping. Now, the interview that we heard at the beginning, oh my God, man. Gus T does try to do my best, facilitating to find important audio snippets and to do research and to not just be like a lazy facilitator, just show up for the book club, halfway fall asleep when the audio is playing. Maybe I keep up with the page number. Like, I really try to take it seriously and try to learn something. Dr. Welsing said reading is more important than watching television for a reason. I went out, and every time we do a session or book, I try to include audio of the author talking about the book. I think that's important, can give you some really interesting insight in terms of their thought process and how the project came together, what they think is important about all of this. I found that interview that is from 1981. I found that interview weeks ago, and I was so excited to play it, but I had to kind of wait until we got to this portion of the book, and we are now there. I did hop ahead a little bit. I normally would have played that, after we read that in the book, but man, I could not wait. Even I have to drill that one down all the way. So what is the date for that interview, Brother Gus? You said 1981. Yep, it's November 18. That's right, Trick Daddy. That's right. It's November 18, 1981. Now, for those who are not informed, that is exact and to the date, 3 years removed from the Jonestown massacre. You got Terry Gross talking to Dr. Maya Angelou, who lived in San Francisco, got a statue in front of the main library downtown San Francisco, across the street from Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk were assassinated on November 27. short days after the massacre, you're talking to Maya Angelou, who lived and got connections, and I said might have even known some of the black people who got killed down there. On November 18, matter of fact, Jim Jones went to Philadelphia and took people, I think some of them black, from the city of brotherly love too, and it didn't come up at all. No, wow, we're speaking on an infamous day, and you lived in San Francisco, and any reflections 3 years removed from the Holocaust, none of that. I say that's an F for journalism, because as soon as I looked at the date, my jaw hit the ground. Wow. Anyway, she spends about, that interview is about 50 minutes, just for context, so they certainly could have stolen like 30 seconds just for Jonestown, right? Anyway, so it's about a 50-minute interview. They spent the first 15 minutes, Terry Gross, suspected race soldier, white woman conducting that interview, she spent the first 15 minutes talking about the exchange with Billie Holiday. That is important, but we have not even finished the book, so it's lots more to come. How in the, just given what we've read thus far, do you think the section with Billie Holiday warrants 25% of a 50-minute interview about this book? Let's put it in mathematical terms. We haven't even heard all of the book yet. Just based on what we have heard, if you were going to structure an interview, would 25% of that interview be about the exchange with Billie Holiday at the beginning of this book? That's one. And it was so tacky. I was going to play, because it was like just drug addict, uncouth Billie Holiday, and her just unscrupulous behavior and all. Like, are you serious? Are you victim of racism, Billie Holiday? That's what we got to spend 15 minutes on? Come on. And it reminded me even what Billie Holiday said about these race soldier white people. They just want to see an old drunk nigger that's been in jail for doing dope and all this. Like, that's exactly what it sounded like from Terry Gross. Gross as can be. Then she said, oh man, how low can you go? Let me show you. Then we get to Lumumba. They're going to go to the UN. Find a thug. Rent a thug. Isn't that one too? I think that might be one too. But get you a thug, privileged black male. The more raggedy, the better. They get up in the stairwell, and white people is killing it. They got video footage of this in Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and old newsreel footage. It kind of looks similar to January 6th. I mean, it's fisticuffs and hand-to-hand combat, and I mean, these are niggers. So the same thing that we said on January 6th. Hey, white people, they would have pulled out the guns, and that's what it looked like. Like, ooh, man. And I mean, it is wild. It is. You have to go and check out Soundtrack to Coup d'etat. Anyway, this white woman, Terry Gross, in the midst of all that, where black people could have been killed and were jailed and beaten and all of this, race war, as they say, counter violence, that's not what's on. She says, you know what I thought about? Oh, no. You got old thugged out Leroy in the stairwell, and he fitting to rape my own. I was so disgusted. Like, I even had to rewind. Like, did I hear that correctly? There is a race war. You have armed white men. We're locked in a stairwell in a fire trap, and it's Leroy fitting to rape no black male. And really, it doesn't matter that that's some old dusty beat up thug nigga. That is any black dude. That could have been her son Guy. It is old Guy fitting the When I heard that, it reminded me, Toni Morrison, the Grandcestors, Toni and Dr. Maya Angelou. Toni Morrison did an interview on NPR circa 2014. I may be a year or two off. She was promoting one of her newer books. And there was a portion where Toni Morrison was talking about a section where her dad threw this white fella down the stairs who was messing with her. And it was a white person who was interviewing her. I don't know if it was Terry Gross. I'm going to have to go back to see now. That would be wild if it was. But anyway, it was a white person interviewing Toni Morrison. And the white woman interviewing Toni Morrison got like offended or taken aback, like, oh my God, this violence, and I can't believe your terrorist Negro, probably rapist dad did this. Toni Morrison checked her so hard live. She said, whoa, 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 whoa. That is just you as a white woman being upset about black counterviolence. She didn't use the term counterviolence, but, you know, defending this child, counterviolence. Man, that white woman got the stumbling and a stammering and a stuttering and I'm trying to, I didn't, sassy Nick, man, I played it on the compensatory call-in way back. That's what it reminded me of, because I mean, like, for real, at this point, if a white person had said that to me, oh my God, man, before we even move forward with the interview, in this context, that's what I would expect from a racist. I would have had to say something to address that. It's not just going to be, no, there was no evidence that I was going to be raped. And in fact, Dr. Angelou, I done put this privileged black male thug in danger of being killed for my recklessness, where I ain't even thought out what all of this is for. That's what this is, not, Leroy fitting to do some raping. But again, that is the sin. Now, even put that together. Now, we got in this book, we got the savages. What'd she say? Worthless black males who believe it's so. And then 1981, we're talking about the 60s, 20 years later, on NPR in Philadelphia, a white woman interviews Dr. Angelou in this. Leroy was finna rape me, wasn't he? Was there outrage? Did they pick it? Terry Gross been on NPR for years. Did she get fired? Did that tank her career? Black male privilege. Anyway, when they got to talking about all that, get you a thug to get through the day, not some old middle class black. That's in the word guide. Fuller says, do not use that term, middle class. I got to thinking when they got to talking about, don't get no bougie black person. Like, isn't Dr. Angelou, wouldn't she be bougie? I don't know. She was living in the commune. She got that doctorate and taught at Wake Forest. Man, you don't talk about a swanky, bougie institution. Woo. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. It hurt my brain computer. Anyway, we're going to hear this scene like right now. So you pay attention and you can see, do you think Leroy was fitting to do some raping? Oh, I can say quickly what she said at the end about those so-called middle-class black people who said these no-count niggers do not represent us, and they went out here acting like some thugs and hooligans themselves. That is true and well documented by white people. I was a little taken aback, but there are lots of newspaper reports. Yes, that did happen. Lots of black people came out and finger wagged and, oh, what a disgrace. That victims guaranteed qualified. Worthy of great pity we are. Let's get to the raping black male. Katherine Massey Book Club, The Heart of a Woman. Audio section number 1.
I was unemployed, but I had never worked so hard in all my life. Monday nights at the Harlem Writers Guild challenged my control. Heavy lids closed my eyes, and the best reading of the best writing could not hold my exhausted attention. A bride, you know. Everyone would laugh. except Rosa, who knew how hard I was trying to be a good housewife. That Africans got her jumping. Hands clapped at the humor of it all, but they were speaking more truth than they knew. When I wasn't home tired, I was as tight as a street balled up in anger. My nerves were like soldiers on dress parade, sharp, erect, and at attention. We were living luxuriously, but I didn't know how much cash we had, nor could I be sure that the bills were paid. Since I was 16, except for 3 married years between, I had made and spent my own money. Now I was given a liberal food and house allowance and a little cash for personal expenditure, taxis, and Tampax. V.U.S. collected and paid the bills. The novelty was not amusing, and my heart was not at peace. Members of the South Africa United Front were invited to India to meet Krishna Menon. When V.U.S. left, I fumbled around the house for a few days, seeing no one but Guy, trying to accommodate an uncomfortable sense of uselessness. When every window was polished and every closet as orderly as department store racks, I decided to go to Abby's house. The most called upon prerequisite of a friend is an accessible ear. He doesn't want me to work, but I don't know what's going on, and it's making me feel crazy. Abby brushed the nap of her long-haired sofa. You wanted a man, Maya Angelou. You've got one. She just didn't know how seriously upset I was. But, Ab, I didn't give over my entire life. You know that's not right. She locked her jaws and stared at me for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was hard and angry. A man's supposed to be in charge. That's the order of nature. She was raising an argument which we had debated for years. My position had always been that no one was responsible for my life except me. I was responsible for Guy only until he reached maturity, and then he had to take control of his own existence. Of course, no man had ever tried to persuade me differently by offering the security of his protection. Well, then, I must be outside of nature, 'cause I can't stand not knowing where my air is coming from. Abby made a clucking sound with her tongue and said, the worst injury of slavery was that the white man took away the black man's chance to be in charge of himself, his wife, and his family. V.U.S. is teaching you that you're not a man, no matter how strong you are. He's going to make you into an African woman. Just watch it. She dismissed the discussion and me, but she didn't know the African women I had met in London or the legendary women in the African stories. I wanted to be a wife and to create a beautiful home to make my man happy, but there was more to life than being a diligent maid with a permanent pussy. Chapter 11. The Cultural Association for Women of African Heritage had its second meeting at Abby's luxury penthouse apartment on Columbus Avenue. Several weeks before, we had agreed on a charter, a policy statement, and a name, C.O.W.S. It sounded exotic. We agreed. The newly founded organization included dancers, teachers, singers, writers, and musicians. Our intention was to support all black civil rights groups. The charter, as drawn up by Sarah Wright and signed unanimously by the membership, stated that since the entire power of the United States was arrayed in fury against the very existence of the Afro-Americans, we, members of C.O.W.S, would offer ourselves to raise money for, promote, and publicize any gathering sincerely engaged in developing a just society. It further stated that our members, multitalented, would agree, after an assenting vote, to perform dance concerts, song fests, fashion shows, and general protest marches. Abby's living room filled with strident voices. Should we or should we not insist that every member show her commitment to being black by wearing unstraightened hair? Abby, Rosa, and I already wore the shortcut natural, but it was the other women, with tresses hanging down like horses' manes, who argued that the natural should be compulsory. I've made an appointment for next Friday. I'm having all this shit cut off because I believe that I should let the world know that I'm proud to be black. The woman placed her hands on the back of her neck and lifted years of hair growth. I said, I don't agree. I would miss seeing her long black page boy. Abby said, I don't agree either. Hair is a part of woman's glory. She ought to wear it any way she wants to. You don't get out of one trick bag by jumping into another. I wear my hair like this because I like it and Max likes it, but I'd dye it green if I thought it would look better. We all laughed and put that discussion aside, addressing ourselves to plans for an immense fashion show based on an African theme and showing African designs. Abby said, "In Harlem, I'm sick of black folks meeting in white hotels to talk about how rotten white folks are." So Rosa and I were assigned to find a suitable auditorium for the affair. Rosa and I met on 125th Street, and the first thing she said was, "Lumumba is dead." She continued in a horror-constricted voice, saying that she had learned of the assassination from Congolese diplomats, but that there would be no announcement until the coming Friday when Adlai Stevenson, the United States delegate to the United Nations, would break the news. I said nothing. I knew no words which would match the emptiness of the moment. Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, and Couture were the holy African triumvirate which radical black Americans held dear, and we needed our leaders desperately. We had been abused, and so long abused, that the loss of one hero was a setback of such proportion it could dishearten us and weaken the struggle. We were walking aimlessly in a fog when the sound of people talking, moving, shouting broke into our stupor. We allowed ourselves to be drawn to the corner where the Nation of Islam was holding a mass meeting. The street corner wriggled with movement as white policemen nervously guarded the intersection. A rapt crowd had pushed as close as possible to the platform where Malcolm X stood flanked by a cadre of well-dressed solemn men. Television crews on flatbed trucks angled their cameras at the crowded dais. Malcolm stood at the microphone. "Every person under the sound of my voice is a soldier. You are either fighting for your freedom or betraying the fight for freedom or enlisted in the army to deny somebody else's freedom." His voice, deep and textured, reached through the crowd, across the street to the tenement windows where listeners leaned half their bodies out into the spring air. The black man has been programmed to die either by his own hand, the hand of his brother, or at the hand of a blue-eyed devil trained to do one thing, take the black man's life. The crowd agreed noisily. Malcolm waited for quiet. "The Honorable Elijah Muhammad offers the only possible out for the black man. Accept Allah as the creator, Muhammad as his messenger, and the white American as the devil. If you don't believe he's a devil, look how he's made your life a hell." Black people yelled and swayed. Policemen patted their unbuttoned holsters. Rosa and I nodded at each other. The Muslim tirade was just what we needed to hear. Malcolm thrilled us with his love and understanding of black folks and his loathing of whites and their cruelty. Unable to get close to the platform, we pushed ourselves into Mr. Michaud's bookshop and watched and listened in the doorway. "Talk, Malcolm." Malcolm roared back, his face a golden yellow in the sun, his hair rusty red. "If you want to live at any cost, say nothing but yes, sir, and do nothing except bow and scrape and bend your knees to the devil. But if you want your freedom, you'd better study the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and start respecting your women. Straighten out your home affairs and stop cheating on your wives. You know who you're really cheating?" Female voices shot up like arrows over the crowd. "Tell these fools, Brother Malcolm. Tell them to stop acting like little boys. Explain it. Explain it on down. Break it down." Malcolm took a breath and leaned toward the microphone. "You are cheating your fathers and mothers and grandfathers and grandmothers, and you are cheating Allah." A man on the platform lifted his hands, showing copper palms, and chanted in Arabic. After a burst of applause, Malcolm paused and looked solemnly at the crowd. People stopped moving. The air became still. When he spoke again, his tone was soft and sweet. "Some of you think there are good whites, don't you? Some good white folks you've worked for, or worked with, or went to school with, or even married. Don't you?" The listeners exchanged a grumble of denial. Malcolm continued speaking low, nearly whispering. "There are whites who give money to the SCLC, the NAACP, and the Urban League. Some even go so far as to march with you in the streets. But let me tell you who they are. Any white American who says he's your friend is either weak." He waited for the word to have its effect, and when he spoke again, his voice growled. Or he's an infiltrator. Either he'll be too scared to help you when you need help, or he's getting close to you so he can end out your plans and deliver you back in chains to his brothers. The street corner exploded with sound as anger and recognition collided. When Malcolm finished speaking, the crowd yelled their approval of the red-hot leader. Rosa and I waited in the bookstore until most of the people left the corner. We walked without speaking to Frank's restaurant. Again, there was no need to talk. Malcolm's words were harsh, but too close to the bitter truth to argue. Our people were alone. As always, alone. We could not expect protection from whites even if they happened to be our relatives. Slave-owning fathers had sold black sons and daughters. White sisters had put their black sisters in slave cons for a price. Rosa and I drank at the bar, not looking at each other. What can we do? What do you think? Rosa turned to me sadly as if I had failed her. She had been counting on me to be intelligent. She continued, frowning. What the shit do you think? We've got to move. We've got to let the Congolese and all the other Africans know that we are with them. Whether we come from New York City or the South or from the West Indies, that black people are a people and we are equally oppressed. I ordered another drink. The only possible action that occurred to me was to call the members of C.O.W.S and throw the idea out for open discussion. Among us, we would find something to do. Something large enough to awaken the black American community in New York. Rosa didn't think much of my idea, but she agreed to go along. About 10 women met at my house. Immediately, the tone was fractious and suspicious. How did Rosa know Lumumba was dead? There had been no announcement in the newspapers. Rosa says she had gotten her news from reliable sources. Some members said that they thought our organization had been formed to support the black American civil rights struggle. Weren't we trying to swallow too much, biting into Africa? Except for S. Couture and Tom Mboya, when had the Africans backed us? One woman, a fashion model, hinted that my husband and Rosa's diplomat boyfriend made us partial to the African cause. Abby said that was a stupid attitude, and what happens in Africa affects every black American. One woman said the only thing Africans had really done for us was to sell our ancestors into slavery. I reminded the conservatives in our group that Martin Luther King had said that he found great inspiration and brotherly support on his recent trip to Africa. Rosa spoke abruptly. Some of us are going to do something. We don't know just what. But all the rest of you who aren't interested, why in the hell don't you get your asses out and stop taking up our time? As usual, when she got excited, her West Indian accent appeared and the music in her voice contradicted the words she chose. Abby got up and stood by the door. A rustle of clothes, the scraping of shoes, and the door slammed, and 6 women were left in the living room. Abby brought brandy, and we got down to business. After a short, fierce talk, our decisions were made. On Friday, we would attend the General Session of the United Nations. We would carry black pieces of cloth, and when Adlai Stevenson started to make his announcement on Lumumba's death, we 6 women would use bobby pins and clip mourning veils to the front of our hair and then stand together in the Great Hall. It wasn't much to do, but it was dramatic. Abby thought some men might join us. She knew Max would like to come along. Amis, Rosa's sister, knew 2 West Indian revolutionaries who would like to be included. If men joined us, we would make elasticized armbands, and at the proper moment, the men could slip the black bands up their sleeves and stand with the women. That was the idea. No mass movement, but still a dramatic statement. As the meeting was coming to an end, I remembered a piece of advice Vuz had given a few young African freedom fighters. Never allow yourself to be cut off from the people. Predators use the separation tactic with great success. If you're going to do something radical, go to the masses. Let them know who you are. That is your only hope of protection. I quoted Vuz to the women and suggested that we let some folks in Harlem know what we intended to do. Everyone agreed. We would go to Mr. Michaud. He could pass the word around Harlem faster than an orchestra of conga drums. The next afternoon, we went back to the bookstore, where posters of blacks covered every inch of wall space not taken up by shelves. Marcus Garvey, dressed in military nary, drove forever in an Oban car on one wall. W.E.B. Du Bois gazed haughtily above the heads of book browsers. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and an array of African chiefs stared down in varying degrees of ferocity. Mr. Michaud was fast-moving, quick-talking, and small. His skin was the color of a faded manila envelope. We stopped him on one of his spins through the aisles. He listened to our plans impatiently, nodding his head. Yeah, the people ought to know. Tell them yourselves. Yeah, you tell them. His short staccato sentences popped out of his mouth like exploding cherry bombs. Come back this evening. I'll have them here. Not nigger time. On time. 7:30, you tell them. He turned, neatly avoiding customers in the crowded aisle. A little after 7 o'clock at the corner of 7th Avenue, we had to push our way through a crowd of people who thronged the sidewalks. We thought the Muslims or the Universal Improvement Association were holding a meeting, or Daddy Grace and his flock were drumming up souls for Christ. Of course, it was a warm spring evening, and already the small apartments were suffocating. Anything could have brought the people into the streets. Mr. Michaud's amplified voice reached us as we neared the bookstore. A lot of you say Africa ain't your business, but you are fools. Niggers and fools. And that's what the white man wants you to be. You made a cracker laugh. Ha ha. His voice barked. Ha ha, crackers laugh. Because of my height, I could see him on a platform in front of the store. He held on to a standing microphone and turned his body from left to right, his jacket apping and a short brim brown hat shading his face from view. Abby, these people. The human crush was denser nearer to the bookstore. These people are here to hear us. She grabbed my hand and I took Rosa's arm. We pressed on. Some of your sisters are going to be talking to you about Africa. In a few minutes, they're going to tell you about Lumumba, Patrice Lumumba, about the goddamn Belgians, about the United Nations. If you are ignorant niggers, go home. Don't stay. Don't listen. And all you goddamn finks in the crowd, run back and tell your white masters what I said. Tell them what these black women are going to say. Tell them about J.A. Rogers' books, which prove that Africans had kingdoms before white folks knew how to bathe. Don't forget Brother Malcolm. Don't forget Frederick Douglass. Tell him. Everybody except ignorant niggers say, get off my back, Charlie. Get off my goddamn back. Here they come now. He has seen us. Come on, Abby. Come on, Myra, you and Rosa. Come on. Get up here and talk. They waiting for you. Unknown hands helped us up onto the unstable platform. Abby walked to the microphone, poised and beautiful. Rosa and I stood behind her, and I looked out at the crowd. Thousands of black, brown, and yellow faces looked back at me. This was more than we bargained for. My knees weakened and my legs wobbled. We are members of C.O.W.S, Cultural Association for Women of African Heritage. We have learned that our brother Lumumba has been killed in the Congo. The crowd moaned. Oh my God. Oh no. Who killed him? Who? Tell us who. Abby looked around at Rosa and me. Her face showed her nervousness. Mr. Michaud shouted, tell him. They want to know. Abby turned back to the microphone. I'm not going to say the Belgians. The crowd screamed. Who? I won't say the French or the Americans. Who? It was a large, hungry sound. I'll say the whites killed a black man. Another black man. Mr. Michaud leaned toward Abby. Tell him what you all are going to do. Abby nodded. On Friday morning, our women and some men are going to the United Nations. We are going to sit in the General Assembly, and when they announce the death of Lumumba, we're going to stand up and remain standing until they put us out. The crowd agreed loudly. I'm coming. I'll be there. Me too. Yeah, stand up and be counted. That's right. A few dissenting voices were heard. Bullshit? Is that all? They kill a man and you broads are going to stand up? Shit. And they'll shoot your asses too. Yes, they will. The opposition was drowned out by the larger encouragement. Mr. Michaud took the microphone. Come here, Myra. The little man could spell my name, but he never pronounced it correctly. You talk? He turned to the crowd. Here's a woman married to an African. Her husband just barely escaped the South African white dogs. Come on, Myra. Say something. I repeated what had already been said at least once. Repetition was a code which everyone understood and appreciated. We had a saying. Make everything you say to time talk. If you say it once, you better be able to repeat it. Black ears were accustomed to the call and response in jazz, in blues, and in the prose of black preachers. Mr. Michaud took the microphone from me and called Rosa. She looked out at the faces and spoke very quickly. We'll be there. Any of you who wants to come will be welcome. We are going to meet at 8:30 in front of the UN. We'll make up extra veils and armbands, and our members will be waiting to distribute them. Come all. Come and let the world know that no longer can they kill black leaders in secret. Come. She gave the microphone to Mr. Michaud and beckoned to me and Abby. We were helped over the stage. The crowd parted and made an aisle of sounds. We'll be there. 8:30 on Friday. See you, sister. See you at the UN. God bless you. We sat quiet in the taxi and held on to each other. The enormity of the crowd and its passionate response had made us mute. We agreed to meet the next day. I went back to an empty house. Guy's dinner dishes drained on the sideboard and a note propped on the dining room table informed me that he was attending the same meeting and to expect him at 10:30. Rosa phoned. We had to draw money from C.O.W.S. Her niece Jean was going downtown to a fabric outlet in the morning. She would buy black tulle and elastic. Rosa would pick up bobby pins from Woolworth's. We ought to meet at her house to make the armbands and stick the pins in the veils. I agreed and hung up. Abby phoned. Would I call the women of C.O.W.S. and would I check with the Harlem Writers Guild? And just to be on the safe side, wouldn't it be a good idea to make up 100 veils and armbands? I agreed. Guy came home full of his meeting. Sane was planning a demonstration on Saturday in New Jersey. He and Chuck would like to go. If the Collenses and I gave permission for them to miss a school day, they would join a march on Friday, walking across the George Washington Bridge. He would be okay, Mom. They would carry sleeping bags and a lot of peanuts, and after all, hadn't I said I wanted him to be involved? Dad would certainly agree if he wasn't in India. My generation had caused the atomic bomb to be dropped on Hiroshima the year he was born, so he could say correctly that he was an atomic baby. He and Chuck had talked. The bomb must never be used again. Human beings had been killed by the hundreds of thousands and millions mutilated, and did I want to see the photographs of Hiroshima again? I gave him permission to go to New Jersey. Jean, Amise, and Sarah cut the bolt of black tulle. Rosa sewed strips of elastic to half the large squares while Abby and I gathered bobby pins into the remainder. Jean pinned a veil to her hair and the stiff material stood out like a softly pleated fan. Her eyes and copper-colored skin were faintly visible through the material. She looked like a young woman, widowed by an untimely accident. We looked at her and approved. Our gesture was going to be successful. On Friday morning, I stepped over Guy's sleeping bag, which he had laid open on the living room floor. It wouldn't be kind to awaken him, since he would be sleeping rough that evening after his march. He knew I had planned to leave the house early for the United Nations. I placed a $5 bill on the plaid sleeping bag and left the apartment. Abby's house was a flurry of action. C.O.W.S women were busy drinking coffee, laying the veils in one box, talking, putting the armbands in another box, eating sweet rolls a teacher had brought, smiling and flirting with Max, who walked around us like a handsome pasha in a busy harem. We left for the elevators, carrying the boxes and jumpy with excitement. Max and Abby could take 4 in their car. The rest would find taxis. We agreed to meet on the sidewalk in front of the UN. Amis and Rosa had the veils, so they rode with Max. The teacher, the model, Sarah, and I would travel together. Jean and the other friends would get their own taxis. Finding a cab so early on Friday on New York's Upper West Side was not easy. Business people had radio-controlled taxis on regular calls, and many white drivers sped up when black people hailed them, afraid of being ordered north to Harlem and or of receiving small tips. At 10 minutes to 9, our taxi turned off 42nd Street onto First Avenue. Sarah and I screamed at the same time. The driver put on brakes and we all crashed forward. What the hell is going on here? The cabbie's alarm matched our own. People stood packed together on the sidewalk and spilled out into the street. Placards stating freedom now, back to Africa, Africa for the Africans. One man, one vote waved on sticks above the crowd. We looked out the windows. Thousands of people circled in the street and all of them were black. We paid and made our way to the crowd. Here she is. Here's one of them. Sister, we told you we'd be here. Where you been? How do we get inside? The police said they won't let us in. The shouts and questions were directed at me. I began a chant and used it moving through the anxious crowd. I'll see about it. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. I'll see about it. Not knowing whom to see or really how I would take care of anything. Rosa was waiting for me in front of the severely modern building by the large glass doors. Can you imagine this crowd? So many people. So many. She was excited and her Caribbean was particularly noticeable. And the guards have refused entrance. Rosa, you said you get tickets from the African delegations. I know, but only the Senegalese and my friend from Upper Volta have shown up. She had to shout because the crowd had begun to chant. She leaned toward me, frowning. I've only got 7 tickets. The people on the sidewalk shouted, Freedom! Freedom! Lumumba! Lumumba! She said, Little Carlos is here. The Cuban, you know. He took the tickets and went in with Abby, Max, Amis, and others. He'll bring the tickets back and take in 6 more. It's the only way. Carlos Moore was an angry young man who moved through Harlem's political sky like a luminous meteor. I looked over at the black throng. Many had never been in Midtown Manhattan, thinking the block south of Harlem as dangerous as enemy territory and no man's land. On our casual encouragement, they had braved the perilous journey. Carlos came trotting through the double doors. Sister, you have arrived. He grinned, his little chocolate face gleeful. I am ready for the next group. Let's go. Now. I turned and without thinking about it, plucked the first people in the crowd. Give me your placards. You're going in. I held the ungainly weighted sticks and Carlos shouted to the chosen men and women. Follow me, brothers and sisters. Stay close to me. They disappeared into the dim foyer and I redistributed the placards. Rosa had walked away into the crowd. I took her example and moved through the people near the building. What's going on, sister? The crackers don't want to let us in, huh? We could break the motherfucker wide open. Shit, all we got to do is die. And we gonna do that any goddamn way. I stopped with that group. Nothing could please the whites more than to have a reason to shoot down innocent black folks. Don't give them the pleasure. An old woman grabbed my sleeve. God will bless you, honey, if you keep the children alive. She sounded wise and was about the age of my grandmother. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I took her hand and pulled her away from the seething mass. She would go in with the next group. We walked to the steps together. I turned and raised my voice to explain what had obviously happened. Informers had alerted the police that Harlem was coming to the UN, so security had been increased. In order to get into the building, we had to exercise restraint. The cops were nervous, so to prevent some trigger-happy idiot from shooting into the crowd, we had to remain cool. The people assented with a grace I found assuring. The old woman and I reached the top steps as Carlos came through the doors. 6 more, and we moved. Now, Carlos gathered the next 5 people along with the old lady and led them into the building. For the next 30 minutes, as Carlos siphoned groups of 6 and led them into the building, more cadres of police arrived to stand armed and confused on the sidewalks and across the street, while plainclothes white men took photographs of the action. A marcher grabbed my sleeve. "What you folks think you're doing? You told us to come down here and now you can't get us in." The man was furious. He continued, "Yeah, that's black folks for you, running around half shaved and grinning." I wanted to explain how some fink had put us in the cross, but Rosa appeared, taking my other sleeve. "Come on, Maya. Come on now." Her urgency would not be denied. I looked at the angry man and lied. "I'll be right back." Inside the gleaming hall, unarmed security guards stood anxiously at their posts. Near the wide stairs leading to the second floor, Carlos was hemmed in by another group of guards. "I've got my ticket. This is mine." Frayed stubs protruded from his black teeth. "They were given to me by a delegate." Rosa and I pushed into the circle, forcing the guards away. Rosa took his arm. "Come on, Carlos, we've got to go." We walked together straight and moderately slowly, controlling the desire to break and run, keening into the General Assembly. Although we were beyond the guards' hearing, Carlos whispered, "The assembly has started. Stevenson is going to speak soon." Upstairs, more guards stood silent as we passed. 2 black men were waiting by the entry to the hall, anxiety flushing their faces. "Carlos, we thought they had you, man." "They'll never have me, Moan. I am Carlos, Moan." His assurance had returned. Rosa smiled at me and we entered the dark, quiet auditorium. Miles away, down a steep incline, delegates sat before microphones in a square of light, but the upper balcony was too dim for me to distinguish anything clearly. After a few seconds, the gloom gave way and the audience became visible. About 75 black people were mixed among the whites. Some women had already pinned veils over their faces. Amis, Jean, and the teacher sat together. Max and Abby were across the aisle near Sarah and the model. An accented voice droned unintelligibly. The little white man so far away leaned toward his microphone, his bald forehead shining white. Dark-rimmed glasses stood out on the well-known face. A scream shattered his first word. The sound was bloody and broad and piercing. In a second, other voices joined it. "Murderers. Lumumba. Lumumba. Killers. Bigoted sons of bitches." The scream still rode high over the heads of astounded people who were rising, clutching each other, or pushing out toward the aisle. The house lights came on. Stevenson took off his glasses and looked to the balcony. The shock opened his mouth and made his chin drop. A man near me screamed, "You Ku Klux Klan motherfuckers." Another yelled, "Murderers." African diplomats were as alarmed as their white counterparts. I was also shaken. We had not anticipated a riot. We had been expected to stand, veiled and mournful, in a dramatic but silent protest. Baby killers. Slave drivers. Terrorized whites in the audience tried to hustle away from the yelling blacks. Security guards rushed through the doors on the upper and lower levels. The garish lights, the stampede of bodies, and the continuing high-pitched scream were overpowering. My knees weakened and I sat down in the nearest seat. A woman in the aisle beside me screamed at the guards. "Don't dare touch me. Don't put your hands on me, you white bastard." The guards were shouting, "Get out! Get out!" The woman said, "Don't touch me, you Belgian bastard." Below, the diplomats rose and formed an orderly line toward an exit. When the piercing scream stopped, I heard my own voice shouting, "Murderers! Killers! Assassins!" Two women grappled with a guard in the aisle. Carlos had leaped onto a white man's back and was riding him to the floor. A stout black woman held the lapels of a white man in civilian clothes. "Who you trying to kill? Who you trying to kill? You don't know me, you dog. You don't know who you messing with." The man was hypnotized and beyond fear, and the woman shook him like a dish rag. The diplomats had vanished, and except for the guards, the whites had disappeared. The balcony was ours. Just as in the southern segregated movie houses, we were in the buzzard's roost again. Rosa found me, and I got up and followed her. We urged the people back to the safety of the street. The black folks strolled proudly past the guards, through the hall and out the doors into sunshine. The waiting crowd, enlarged by latecomers and more police, had changed its mood. Insiders had told outsiders that we had rioted, and now an extravagant disorder was what the blacks wanted, while the law officers yearned for vindication. Let's go back in. Let's go in and show them bastards we mean business. This ain't no United Nations. This is just united white folks. Let's go back in. A cadre of police stood on the steps, their eyes glittering. By law, they were forbidden inside the uni building, but they were eager to prevent our re-entry. Some folks screamed at the silent, seething police. "You killed Lumumba, too. You shit. I wish I had your ass on 125th Street. Take off your pistol. I'll whip your ass." Carlos rushed to me. "We're going to the Belgian consulate. Walk together." Rosa's voice was loud. 46th Street. The Associated Press building. Let us go. Let's go. The crowd began to move between a corridor of police which stretched to the street. Up front, someone had started to sing. "And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave." The song rippled, now high, now low, picked up by voices and dropped but never discarded. "And go home to my God and be free." Mounted police, sitting tall on hot horses, looked down as we crossed First Avenue, singing. Rosa and I were walking side by side in the last group as we turned into 43rd Street. I said, "That scream started it. Wonder who screamed." She frowned and laughed at the same time. "Amis, and she almost killed Jean." The marchers around us were singing. "No more slavery, no more slavery, no more slavery over me." Rosa continued. Amis says she looked down and saw Stevenson and thought about Lumumba. She reached to caress her daughter, but Jean jumped and Amis screamed. Unfortunately, she had her arm round Jean's neck. So when Jean jerked, Amis tightened her grip and kept screaming. Nobody was going to hurt her baby. So she screamed. Rosa laughed. Nobody but Amis. She nearly choked Jean to death. The crowd was trooping and chanting. 6 mounted police climbed the sidewalk and rode through the stragglers. People jumped out of the way as the horses bore down on them. A wiry black man unable to escape was being pressed against the wall of a building. I flung myself toward him, slapping horses, jutting my elbows into their flanks. "Get away! Move, damn it!" The man was against the wall, ignoring the horses, staring up at the policeman. I reached him and took his hand. "Come on, brother. Come on, brother." We walked between the shifting horses and back to Rosa, who had halted the group. Rosa was grinning, her face filled with disbelief. "Maya Angelou, I thought you were scared of animals. You went into those horses kicking ass." She was right. I had never owned a pet. I didn't understand the intelligent idiocy of dogs or cats. In fact, all animals terrorized me. The day's action had taken away my usual self and made me uncommon. I was literally intoxicated with adventure. We approached the corner of 46th and 6th Avenue, and the intersection reminded me of a South American news telecast. For the moment, heavily armed police and angry people seemed to neutralize the scene. Bright sunlight left no face in shadow, and the two groups watched each other warily, moving dreamily this way and then that way and this. Policemen's hands were never far from their pistols, and plainclothes officers spoke into the static of walkie-talkies. Black demonstrators edged along the sidewalk, rumbling and carrying battered and torn placards. Police cars were parked double in the street, and a captain walked among his men, talking and looking obliquely at the crowd, trying to evaluate its mood and its intention. When Rosa dashed away from me and into the shuffling crowd, a bare-boned officer came over. "You're one of the leaders?" His pink face was splotched with red anger. Following the Southern black advice, if a white man asks you where you're going, you tell him where you've been, I answered. "I'm with the people." "Where is your permit?" "You people have to have a permit to demonstrate." 3 black men suddenly appeared, placing themselves between the policeman and me. "What do you want with this black lady?" "Watch yourself, Charlie. Don't mess with her." Instantly, more police surrounded my protectors, and black people from the dragging line, seeing the swift action, ran over to encircle the newly arrived police. I had to make a show of confidence. I looked into the officer's face and said, "Permit? If we left it to you whites, we'd be in the same shape as our folks in South Africa. We'd have to have a permit to breathe." A man standing by my side added, "No, we ain't got no damn permit. So you better pull out your pistols and start shooting. Shoot us down now, 'cause we ain't moving." The policemen, eager to accept the man's invitation, snorted and fidgeted like enraged horses. The officer reined them in with his voice. He shouted, "It's all right, men." I said, "It's all right. Back to your stations." There was a brief period of hateful staring before the cops returned to the street, and we rejoined the larger group of black people shuffling along the pavement. Rosa found me. "Carlos is inside." Her eyes were narrowed. "Somebody said he's been in there over a half hour. The Belgian consulate is on the 11th floor. Maybe the cops have got him." The knowledge of what police do to black men rose wraith-like before my eyes. Carlos was little and pretty and reminded me of my brother. The cops did have Bailey, and maybe he was being clubbed or raped at that very minute. I saw a horrifying picture of Bailey in the hands of madmen, but there was nothing I could do about it. I could do something about Carlos. I said, "I'm going in. You keep the people marching." I searched the faces nearest me. Vooz once told me, "If you're ever in trouble, don't under any circumstances ask black middle-class people for help. They always think they have a stake in the system. Look for a Satsi, that's Joseph for a street hoodlum, a roughneck, a convict. He'll already be angry, and he will know that he has nothing to lose." I continued looking until I saw the man. He was taller than I, rail thin, and the color of bitter chocolate. One deep scar ran from the range of his left nostril to his earlobe, and another lay between his hairline and his left eyebrow. I beckoned to him, and he came toward me. "Brother, my name is Maya. I think Carlos Moore is in this building somewhere. He's the leader of this march. The cops may have him, and you know what that means." "Yeah, sister, yeah." He nodded wisely. "I want to go in and see about him, and I need somebody to go with me." He nodded again and waited. "It'll be dangerous, but will you go?" "Sure." The planes on his face didn't change. "Sure, Sister Maya. Let's go." He took my elbow and began to propel me to the steps. I asked, "What's your name?" He said, "Call me Buddy." Rosa's voice came to me as we went through the revolving doors. "Be careful, Maya." The lobby was busy with police, guards, and milling white men. Although my escort was pushing me quickly toward the bank of elevators, I had time to look at the building's directory. Above the 11th floor listing of the Belgian consulate were the words American Book Company, 10th floor. A fat, florid police officer stepped in front of me and my companion. "Where are you going?" The Satsi spoke. "None of your goddamn business." I poked his side and said sweetly, "I'm going to the American Book Company." The cop and the Satsi stared knowingly at each other. Loathing ran between the two men like an electrical current. "And you, where do you think you're going?" "I'm going with her, every step of the way." The cop heard the challenge and narrowed his eyes, and I heard the protection and felt like a little girl. The pudgy cop followed us to the elevators, and I pushed the 10th floor button, holding onto the black man's hand. The ride was tense and quick. We walked out into the hall and turned to watch the officer's face until the doors closed. I said, "Let's find the stairs." Around the corner, we saw the exit sign. "Buddy, you go through and let the door close, then see if you can open it again." He walked out onto the landing and waited until the door slammed shut. I stepped back as he turned the knob and opened the door from his side. "Come on, let's get up there." We raced up the steps to the 11th floor. He grabbed the knob, but the door wouldn't open. That cracker cop, he beat us to it. "Stay here." He turned and trotted up another flight. I heard him mutter, "This damn door is locked too." He came down the steps heavily. "What you want to do now?" I couldn't think at the moment. I had only a vague plan to reach the 11th floor and see about Carlos. My mind had not budged beyond the possibility of achieving that feat. I looked stupidly at Buddy, who was waiting for an answer. After a few seconds, my voice surfaced. "I guess there's nothing else to do but go back to the street. I'm sorry." I expected to see disgust or at least derision on my accomplice's face, but he displayed no emotion. "All right, sister, let's go." We walked back down to the 10th floor and I pushed the door, but it resisted. I must have gasped because he pushed me aside and grabbed the knob. "Let me do it." He took the knob and leaned his body against the metal panel, but the door wouldn't give. Panic accelerated my blood. Like an idiot, I had given myself to death. The cops could open the door any minute and blow my brains out. No one would see and no one would be able to protect me. I saw an image of my son in his classroom. Who would tell him, and how would he handle the news? My new husband would receive a telegram in India. What would he think of a wife so frivolous as to commit suicide? My poor mother. The man beside me, whom fear had caused me to forget, took my shoulders in his hand. "Sister, sister, you ain't got nothing to worry about. I'm here." He released me and stood on the landing's edge. "They'll have to walk over my dead body to get to you."
This week, after the website TMZ erroneously reported that Maya Angelou had been hospitalized, rumors of her death spread quickly over the internet via Twitter. Here to comment, Maya Angelou.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming, Dr. Angelou.
Oh, call me Dr. Maya Angelou.
Dr. Maya Angelou, I'm glad to see you're doing well.
Oh, I am absolutely alive, Dr. Seth Meyers. But this incident has been very troubling to me and my family, so much so that I wrote a poem about it. It's called I Am Absolutely Alive. It's in the sway of my hips, the strength of my stride. I am not dead. I am absolutely alive. It's in the curl of my lip, the arch of my back, in the calcium supplements that daily I snack. I am alive. Fantastic, geriatric. I stretch and I thrive like control top elastic. I am absolutely alive.
Wow, that was really moving. Now, I understand that this isn't the first time that you've been the victim of internet rumors.
That is correct, Seth. In 2007, it was reported that I had been shot in the neck by Ja Rule. This was erroneous. And in 2003, it was rumored that I was dating Derek Jeter. Absolutely false. At the time, I was exclusively with Alex Rodriguez.
Wow, okay. So I would think that this latest incident with TMZ would be the last straw for you.
Well, Seth, I always take the high road. I'm not angry at TMZ. I just feel sorry for them. So much so, I wrote a poem about it.
I thought you might.
It's called I Feel Sorry for You, TMZ. TMZ, you muckraking muskrats. You sad, selfish slingers of celebrity cellulite. From Tom and Katie Cruz to Heidi and Spencer, you spread your lies. Well, I hope you get cancer. I do not forgive you, but for your sake, I hope you. Watch what you say, because I am friends with Oprah. Thank you for having me, Dr. Seth Meyers.
I'm not a doctor.
Now I'm off to TMZ to slash all their tiles.
Dr. Maya Angelou for Weekend Update on Seth Meyers. Good night.
Context of White Supremacy, the Katherine Massey Book Club. That is the end of audio segment 1. We will resume in chapter 11 as we get more details about the riot at the UN. Again, they have video footage from all of this, 1961, January. It was in the newspapers. It is shown in the conclusion. This is like the end of the film, literally. Soundtrack to Coup d'etat. They show the scenes at the UN, and they have that juxtaposed with Abby Lincoln and Max Roach performing their, I think it's called the African Suite. Might have the title incorrect, but all of their songs, counter-racist themes, that's paired with the scenes from the UN, not in the street, and it is stunning. Soundtrack to Coup d'etat. Anywho, first segment, the number to dial if you have questions, thoughts, observations, the number 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com, untiljustice@gmail.com. Before we proceed, now we did pop out at the end of that read, Saturday Night Live. I said, our time has been out of this world as usual for this read. Again, the cows, the metronome. Dave Chappelle, victim of white supremacy, entertainer, talking about Mr. Godfrey and Red Fox mentioned in the book we're reading. So Dave Chappelle, carrying on the lineage of Negroes leading the entertainment committee, Dave Chappelle hosted Saturday Night Live just a few days ago. Saturday, right? SNL. That same, and it's the 50-year anniversary of Saturday Night Live. So what has been the 50-year history of Saturday Night Live? White supremacy, racism. Now, I could have just said all that. I said buckwheat. I don't care who out there is a fan. I love Chris Rock. I love Tracy Morgan. Yeah. Buckwheat. And that's it. But this is the Katherine Massey Book Club. I was searching for audio related to this book. like that interview that we started with Raping Black Males and Terry Gross from November 18, 1981. I was searching for things like that, and I kept seeing these videos. Maya Angelou, Saturday Night Live. Maya Angelou, Saturday Night Live. It just, like, what is, I don't watch Saturday Night Live. I mean, buckwheat. For people who don't know, Eddie Murphy was on Saturday Night Live way back, like a half century ago. And one of his infamous characters was Buckwheat, who is, I think, the only black child on a television show from like 100 years ago, literally called Little Rascal. And so this was the child, and so Buckwheat is the black child on the show full of white people. And so Eddie Murphy would play the adult Buckwheat. And I think Buckwheat gets almost killed, shot one time. That's like a whole minstrel show, white supremacy, racism. But that's like his most infamous character, Buckwheat. And anyway. But they don't just have a parody, running parody, where they have these skits like what you just heard of Dr. Maya Angelou on Saturday Night Live. And this is before she transitioned. They always have a privileged black male playing Dr. Maya Angelou, like what you just heard. It doesn't get any better than tacky. And they have so many of these, I don't even know if we'll have time to play them all, because we're kind of getting close to the end of the book, but I'm going to see how many of them we can cram in before we go out, just because it gave, like, if it had just been like 3, I maybe would have just said, oh, okay, they had a racist sketch, but it's like a bunch of them. Like, okay, what is going, like, really? Tyler Perry wasn't enough? We couldn't get Dave Chappelle, so to make up for that Maya and Still I Rise and poetry writing, no count nigga, we're going to mock her every chance we get on Saturday Night Live. And we got to get a nigger male privileged. I'm a man. Yeah, put this here dress on and give us your best man. He didn't even sound like Dr. Maya Angelou. They got Tracy Morgan. They get different black dudes. They get different black, a variety, a menagerie of privileged black males. Come in here and put it'll be funny. Put this here on and pretend to be Dr. Maya Angelou. It'll be cute. Let's see. Folks who dialed in. Now remember, from what you just heard now, did it sound like a thugged out hoodlum black dude? Did you think, oh my God, he is fixing to rape Maya Angelou? Not again. Did you, at any point, did you think that's what was going down? Random black thug was about to do some raping? Let's see, folks who dialed in with a hand. I guess I should ask too, had they seen, like, you were aware that Saturday Night Live, that was a skit, a regular skit mocking Dr. Maya Angelou? Was anyone aware of that? Maybe I'm just late catching up on things. That'll be my 2 questions thus far for this week. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, proceed.
May I be heard?
Octavius in New York, Saturday Night Live. Yes, sir.
Yeah, to answer your first question, as a black male, it is frustrating to hear that, and the fact that the interviewer's first thought was, "Oh my God, you're going to get raped." And I say that to say that when I was first, and this is a personal take, but I'm going to circle it back to the book, which is when I first started dating my significant other, we were going to meet in my company's building, the company building I was working at, and she told me one of her coworkers said, "Well, be careful, you don't let him do anything to you that you don't want to do." And my immediate response to her was, whoever that coworker is, do not hang around her, and I don't want to be around her if you bring me around her, but you don't have to tell me. But that's the immediate thought I had, because I think that happens to every black man at one point or another. And here he was doing the complete opposite. I mean, I don't know if he could even have lived to hear this. But the second question about the Saturday Night Live, I don't remember seeing that skit, and I didn't really think it was funny hearing it either. It just sounds kind of bland. But at Saturday Night Live, they do a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of issues with that show on different levels, to say the least. Getting back to the book, one of the segments that I did notice on my book, it's page 182, is when Rosa found out the information about Lumumba and gathered all the women from COWS. It seemed as if that divide between African Americans and Africans was very noticeable even back then, and we still deal with that today. And I think that's something to really pay attention to, because I do see the consistency, because if it was going on back then, I don't know how intense it was, if it seems as intense it is now, or maybe less. I'm unsure, but it definitely sparked my interest, the fact that did occur. And there was, in 183, and one other thing, they do drink a lot. They drink a lot. I think in that couple of pages alone, they drank at least 2 or 3 times, if I'm correct. And my page 183, never allow yourself to get cut off from the people. Predators use separation tactics with great success. I think that was a really nice line. I really think it was well written, straight to the point, honest. On mine 184, at the bottom, she was making some observations about the streets when she was on 7th Ave. And it said, of course, it was a warm spring evening. Already the small apartments were suffocating. And immediately what I thought about was environment, and how places like Harlem, any places where there's a dense population of black people, the heat in those areas, and I think you definitely had somebody on that discussed this, the heat in that area is just, it's painful. There's people have a very difficult time with that. And it's interesting that she pointed that out here in her writing, even though it was one sentence. I'll leave it there. I have some more things to comment, but I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Much obliged, Octavius in New York. Suffocating. That is important. Suffocating. And she's not even in Los Angeles, but suffocating. And that was because of what's happening currently in Los Angeles. Dr. Maya Angelou, again, I didn't even know she just got that statue. She has the first statue of a black female in San Francisco. They just put that statue up in front of the main library, which again is right across the street from City Hall, where Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk were assassinated, probably by Jim Jones. But that statue was just placed there like 2 months or so before I got there. Like, wacky. But suffocating. Putting black people in areas where it's stifling. No air conditioning. Yes, Lord, we'll go outside. Do whatever you talk about, it doesn't even matter. Let's get outside so we can breathe, brush of fresh air, anything. And in fact, we should all know this and be very familiar with this, because we are post-COVID. So they talked about all of this as a factor in black people having respiratory issues and asthma and such. Comorbidities, that was the word. Other folks who dialed in with commentary, proceed.
May I be heard?
Lauren, yes, ma'am. Did you, I don't know if you watched Saturday Night Live, was that skit, had you heard that before? Did you know they had a Maya Angelou skit on SNL? And did it sound like we were fixing to hear Maya Angelou raped again?
So I don't think I had seen one of those skits before, and I did not think that the black male was going to rape her at all. And when we were reading over that section, I was really wondering, like, at what point she formed that thought, or maybe it was there the whole time. I don't know. So as far as my comments for that last section, there was a part, she was talking to Abby, and she was talking about Vu. And I'm not, am I saying is it Vu or Voos? The so-called husband, not husband. Do you know?
I think it's Vus, but I mean, they don't pronounce C.O.W.S correctly either. So I think it's Vus. So I don't know.
Right, and she kept calling him mate too instead of Make. So I really don't know about some of the pronunciations in here. But the part that I want to comment on first, Abby says a man's supposed to be in charge. That's the order of nature. And I think males and females tend to have different qualities and strengths. But two victims of racism together, neither is in charge. The best it can be is a partnership with minimal conflict. Also, black males and females are not men and women. We seem to not understand that, and we spend way too much time pretending otherwise. Let me see. Okay. There was another part. She said, we all laughed and put that discussion aside, addressing ourselves to plans for an immense fashion show based on an African theme and showing African designs. Abby said, in Harlem, I'm sick of black folks meeting in white hotels to talk about how rotten white folks are. So Rosa and I were assigned to find a suitable auditorium for the affair. And I just wondered, maybe it was different back then, but how many hotels and auditoriums are owned by people classified as black in New York City? And I just couldn't imagine that it was very many. Also, when they were at the meeting in Miss Abby Lincoln's, I think it was at her apartment, it came up, should we or should we not insist that every member show her commitment to being black by wearing unstraightened hair? Abby, Rose, and I already wore the shortcut natural, but it was the other women with tresses hanging down like horses' manes who argued that the natural should be compulsory. The way a person wears their hair does say something about their thought patterns, right? But a person should understand why they want to look the way they want to look. I think that's what's most important, to be trying to understand your own thought processes about why you're doing what you're doing. That's much more important. Let me see. Okay. When they were discussing what they were going to do after they heard about the death of Patrice Lumumba, she said we would carry black pieces of cloth, and when Adlai Stevenson started to make his announcement on Lumumba's death, we 6 women would use bobby pins and clip mourning veils to the front of our hair and then stand together in the Great Hall. It wasn't much to do, but it was dramatic. And that part and just the way everything worked out at the UN, it made me think of something I heard Gus say on the broadcast some years ago. I was listening to an old program about talking to suspected racists, and it was a quote from Amilcar Cabral, I think. And if I wrote it correctly, The quote is, in revolutionary process, the desire for visibility is a teething disease, and that massive crowds gathered to make demonstrations of insurrectionary yearning before white people make no sense. Quiet, selective, effective, efficient initiatives will do. That's what I thought about when she was talking about being dramatic and just the way everything worked out. And also when they were talking, they brought up that they were talking, some of the black people were saying how the only thing Africans had really done for us was to sell our ancestors into slavery. And she said, I reminded the conservatives in our group that Martin Luther King had said that he found great inspiration and brotherly support on his recent trip to Africa. But what confused me, like, I didn't understand what exactly a conservative was supposed to be in that context. Like, when a white person calls himself a conservative, I kind of get it. You know, maybe I'll ask, but hey, you want to conserve racism, white supremacy. Got it. But what could a conservative be in that context? I really didn't understand. Let's see. Oh, Guy, he said he wanted to go to a protest or a SANE meeting, and I didn't know what that was. Oh, now I looked it up and I wrote it down, and now it's gone, so it didn't save. I don't feel like looking for it now. I guess I'll get back to it later. There was another name. She's talking about one of her female associates, and her name is spelled Amece, and I don't know if that's Amise or Amiche. I wasn't sure. Also, when Guy was talking about going to this protest or whatnot, he said Dad would certainly agree if he wasn't in India. My generation had caused the atomic bomb to be dropped on Hiroshima the year he was born, and she called him an atomic baby and all that. And I just thought it was weird that he called his dad. It's pretty soon for that. I guess it's nice that they're getting along though. When they get there, it said at 10 minutes to 9, our taxi turned off 42nd Street onto First Avenue, and Sarah and I screamed at the same time. The driver put on the brakes, and we all crashed forward. Now, they were supposed to meet there at 8:30. It's 8:50, and they're still in the taxi. Now, maybe this doesn't matter to other people. I don't think that's cool. Like, you say you're going to be somewhere, be there, and be there earlier. Like, if it's important, be there earlier than y'all are supposed to meet. I don't like that. I really don't like being late. That's stressful for me. Then when she gets there, it's a lot of black people. They're not able to get in. And she said the shouts and questions were directed at me. I began a chant and used it moving through the anxious crowd. I'll see about it. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. I'll see about it. Not knowing whom to see or really how I would take care of anything. And I didn't understand why she said, I'll take care of it. Just why would she say that? She admitted she doesn't know who to talk to or how she would take care of anything. I'll see about it is a better thing to say in my view. It's more honest. And I guess it kind of bothers me the way, it seems like she lies a lot for no reason, and I just don't get it. She did it earlier when she was talking to her son. She was like, oh, this will be okay with Guy if I tell him this will be our last move. And I was like, how could she make that sort of statement with any degree of confidence? She just the unnecessary practice of deception. I don't think it's necessary. That part I don't think is admirable. Let me see. A black male commented on it. Okay. It says more cadres of police arrived to stand armed and confused on the sidewalks and across the street while plainclothes white men took photographs of the action. A marcher grabbed my sleeve. What you folks think you're doing? You told us to come down here and now you can't get us in. The man was furious. He continued, yeah, that's black folks for you, running around half-shaved and grinning. I guess it's kind of a metaphor, but maybe not even. Who knows, right? But yes, we are ill prepared, and we say things that maybe aren't true. Even right after that, she said, I wanted to explain how some think had put us in the cross, but Rosa appeared, taking my other sleeve. Come on, Maya, come on now. Her urgency would not be denied. I looked at the angry man and lied. I'll be right back. See, like, that sort of thing happens quite a bit. I don't know. I don't want to feel like I'm like passing judgment or anything, but we are reading the text and we are supposed to be sharing our thoughts about this. I don't think that's correct behavior. I mean, maybe, you got a lot of white people, you got a lot of police, that's one thing, but not to other non-white people. Let me see. Oh, and she called it an extravagant disorder. So the waiting crowd, enlarged by latecomers and more police, had changed its mood. Insiders had told outsiders that we had rioted, and now an extravagant disorder was what the blacks wanted, while the law officers yearned for vindication. I thought that was an interesting term, extravagant disorder, and maybe that was what the black people wanted. And also, I don't think what happened on the inside could be classified as a riot. A couple of people screaming and yelling and, being a little unruly. I don't know. I don't think that was a riot. Let me see. Police walks up and asks her if she was one of the leaders. Maya Angelou is not a leader nor any other non-white person. When they got to that, I'm sorry. I'm reading this part, and it said Gene responded by calling him a sapsucker. It's just a lot of name calling in here. I shouldn't laugh at that. Let me see. And that's all. I think I might have patched up where we left off. I think that's all I have for now, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
I guess quickly, as one of the folks who saw soundtrack to Coup d'etat, and I think some other folks have said it is becoming available and it's online at Canopy and perhaps other locations, so you can check it out. If you've read either of the two books, Andrée Blouin, Heart of a Woman, you should probably check it out. You'll see or hear, you won't see Dr. Maya Angelou, but this book is quoted, so they will both be cited. From what you remember, the scenes from what took place at the UN, did it resemble January 6th in any way? Any similarities between the two? Yay, nay?
Gus, I don't remember. That was last year, so I don't remember that scene in particular.
Gotcha. Has been some time for sure. Alrighty, let's see. Much obliged. Oh, and the SANE, National Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy, SANE, SANE. Now, I did think from that time period, like the nuclear bomb was dropped on the Japs. So that is counter-racist activity. And they terrorized all those non-white people to get the uranium in places like the Congo to make that bomb. So even if it's not stated, that is like counter-racist activity, because they didn't bomb the Germans. Eisenhower, he got to be president and such. But anyway, National Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy. Okie dokie, let's see. *61, other folks, if you have commentary to share. Let's see. Email number 1. Now, from last week, we had a listener who wrote in. He was saying, Dr. Angelou, these were her younger years. And I questioned, I said, well, what do you mean younger? Because she's in her 30s, as Terry Gross, suspected racist, pointed out in their NPR interview. And I said, well, what do you mean younger? And the more that I thought about it, I was like, yeah, she's in her like mid-30s. And in fact, she's not just in her mid-30s at this point, or it's not at this point. Neely Fuller Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., born in 1929. Dr. Maya Angelou, born in 1928. She is their senior. When they meet in this book, she is older than Dr. King. That'd be the case at any point, but just she's a senior. Then I thought, so do we think of like the 1960s as Dr. King's younger years, and I'm even putting it in context of his activism. Like at that point, he'd been an activist for a decade. Though, like the 1960s, March on Washington, is that Dr. King's younger years? That was a question that I had in my brain computer, and I'm just putting this out because it is fact. I said last week, even in the context of Dr. Welsing, not supposed to have children, I believe, unless I'm in error, females 30, males 35. Dr. Angelou, female, she's in her 30s, even by Dr. Welsing's standard. She, now, not for God, but at the point that we're reading, she could even have children and qualify for Dr. Welsing's standards, and really almost encroaching on both because she's almost 35 at the point that we're reading. So, I mean, this is not teenage Maya Angelou, you know, whatever. That's just the point that I've raised a few times. So anyway, I raised that question about, you know, Dr. Angelou, she's older than Dr. King and Mr. Fuller. So the person responded, who had said, Dr. Angelou, this is her younger years. He responded, interesting question. I did not necessarily mean that she was youthful or immature, but that she was at an earlier stage of her life. My perspective on youth, my younger 30s self and life, has evolved as I near my 70s. I am not sure Dr. King is a good comparison since he did not live past 39, and unfortunately we will never know what type of person he would have become if he lived into his 80s. With regards to Mr. Fuller, since he is in his 90s, I would also consider his late 30s as his younger years, which was more than half a century ago, and of course Dr. Angelou lived into her 80s. The question reminds me a little of what Dr. Welsing recommended regarding having children, having no more than 2 children separated by 4 years and being prepared to support them until age 35. I hope this clarifies my thinking, given my less than expert writing skills. Regards, thanks for the question. There you go, since it was related to the text. For at least my perspective, and I'll have to pay attention to this as we exit the text, I guess one, we do not qualify as men and women, right? And even ironic because manhood is such a massive theme in this text, even talked about again this week. I mean, just page after page, being a man, being a man, being a man. We do not qualify, not even close, and that is still the case, 2025. We do not qualify for woman either. And I said, man, that is crazy because we got guy, everything. I'm a man. 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 Even Voo's. I'm a man. An African man. I'm an African man. Dangerous African man. And all that in a book titled The Heart of a Woman. No, 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 and no. Victims of white supremacy. Boys, girls, males, females. That's what we got. That's one, but it does, at least I think, at times, Guy comes across as younger than he is, particularly that exchange with Billie Holiday. And then at times, Dr. Angelou, I think, she comes across as young and immature, like that type of young, like this is a teenager. And it's like, wait a minute, she's in her 30s. Not, again, wouldn't qualify for a woman, but she's in her 30s. Like, this is not a, teenager that we're listening to. Anyway, I'll have to keep in mind and point out other spots if I think this pattern continues through the text. Any hoodles. Let's see. Their actual commentary for this week. So I guess this would be email 1.5. The book was published in 1981 by Random House, same year as that Terry Gross interview we heard. In 1997, Heart of a Woman was selected by Oprah Winfrey as a part of her book club selection. It became a bestseller and had a total printing of over 1 million copies after its initial publication. I wonder what influence suspected racists had on editing of the text. I can tell you the abridged audiobook, they cut a lot. I would love to see how this scene
What did they leave in? What did they take out? I can't even imagine. Let's see. In her second autobiography, Gather Together in My Name, published in 1971, she admitted that she worked as a prostitute. She was reluctant to publish this in the book. However, her last husband, suspected racist Paul D. Foe, encouraged her to include it. From my little bit of reading, Maya Angelou never disclosed publicly who the suspected racist father of her son Guy. The biological father was some random, handsome white dude from the neighborhood who she became involved with sexually because she was not sure if she liked men. She married her first husband in 1951, Tosh Angelos. I think they said he's so-called Greek. We're saying that he was not white because he's Greek. Bakari Henderson, another suspected racist. This is not extensive research on my part, and thus I cannot attest to its accuracy. Much obliged. Chapter 10. I followed him meekly around a furniture store where he selected an expensive bed, a tea coffee table, and a giant brown leather sofa. He paid in cash, pulling bills from a large roll of money. The source of Vuze's money was a mystery. Is she implying that there was something untoward about his income? Otherwise, why mention it? I guess maybe she had to, well, one, it seems like Thomas from before, it seems like she was suggesting that he had some sort of criminal enterprise where he was acquiring luggage or whatever else through maybe unscrupulous means. So if she had experienced that before, she might have had heightened, anxiety or questions, particularly around black males, worthless. Where would he get all of this cash? Where would he get all of this money type of a thing? Even if she didn't have proof, maybe. 2, I wanted to be a wife and to create a beautiful home to make my man happy, but there was no more to life than being a diligent maid with a permanent pussy. Did not take her long to have second thoughts about this liaison. Non-white victims should ask a minimum of 200 questions before engaging in sexual contact. I don't really, I mean, certainly she didn't transcribe every question and conversation that they had, but man, I just don't, it does not seem like there was an extensive questioning period. Like, yeah, where's all this cash from, right? That for sure, like that might even branch out into like 10 questions at least, right? Anyway, chapter 11. I already wore the shortcut natural, but it was the other women with tresses hanging down like horses' manes who argued that the naturals should be compulsory. I've made an appointment for the next Friday. Hey, remember Christopher? Never mind. Thinking Ice Cube. Never mind. Racist white supremacists have conditioned us to be fixated on our hair. Agreed. Amen. Soul clap. Amen. 2. Some members said that they thought our organization had been formed to support the black American civil rights struggle. When had Africans backed us? What happens in Africa affects every black American. One woman said the only thing Africans had really done for us was to sell our ancestors into slavery. Tell it, sister. Echoes of current conflicts between so-called foundational black Americans and African immigrants. I mean, hey, my black brother sound clip, I would play it. Non-white people do not like non-white people. Nobody likes anybody. And the people that are classified as black, we don't like each other. I mean, you can look at the same time period. Black people who were born here and they got 8 great-grandparents all born in Mississippi, they don't get along. They don't agree on what should be done about people classified as white. So, hey, come on. If I don't get along with the people that I went to the black people that I went to kindergarten with, live on my same street, I don't get along with them and we barely speak. How would we don't even speak the same language and you got them clicks and all that. No chance. Beat it. Matter of fact, I got to get back to Leroy over here in Cleveland because we haven't even settled. I remember what you did in high school, Leroy. Get to you folks on the continent later. Now, let's see. 3. Michaud came back this evening. I'll have them here. Not nigger time, on time, 7:30. You tell them, but you are fools, niggers and fools, everybody except ignorant niggers. If we could just stop name calling each other, seems so simple, but obviously not. Obviously. Like, that's why I was so excited. Like, what? They actually name call white people in this part of the book? Whew, can't wait. But yet, no name calling. No name calling. It be on time. Now, hey, if you can't be early, be on time. You can't emphasize the importance of punctuality without name calling. And certainly, nigger time is name calling. I don't even say CP time. If you can't be early, be on time. And then I add that to the 10 stops. Do not waste non-white people, victims of white supremacy's time and energy. Let's see. Being late, you are violating that code. Let's see. 4. United Nations, we're going to sit in the General Assembly, and when they announce the death of Lumumba, we're going to stand up and remain standing until they put us out. When the piercing scream stopped, I heard my own voice shouting, murderers, killers, assassins. A few years ago, I was at a lecture and a video was played of this demonstration, and the lecturer pointed out Dr. Angelou, and you could hear her voice yelling. Is there video of her at the UN protest in the movie soundtrack to Coup d'etat? Now, I have not seen it at a point where I had control of it, where I could pause it and look at the, faces, like, oh, let's see, and they don't have, because the audio that's playing when you see all this is of Abby Lincoln singing, who may also be there. But again, now even ironic, because now I've seen it 3 times and on a big screen, so that would be the best place to be like, oh, there she is right there, because she'd be huge. But, you have to be, and at that time, I didn't even know she was in the crowd to be looking like, oh, there she is right there. But yeah, I'd have to go back. They do have newsreel footage of this where you can go back and watch that too and just kind of slow it down and see if you can pick them out and such. Let's see. Oh, on YouTube, British Path anti-Belgium demonstrations over Congo crisis 1961. On YouTube, check it out. I'll post it, share, see if you can slow it down, maybe time stamp where she is. 5. Flat, florid police officer stepped in front of me and my companion. Florid defined as red, maybe a more eloquent way of saying redneck. 6. We will stop there. Didn't get that far. Man, I didn't really get to any of the... No, I will just say, man, 1, once again, where are the patriarchal, sexist, misogynistic, privileged black males? When Mr. Michaud, when they, get this idea and all that, it's not, well, we got to get some black, manly, muscular, authoritative black males, African dudes to come in here and talk about this issue because we don't listen to no nigger women. That's not what he said. He said be on time. Now, he did do some name calling in general, but he said be on time. Y'all get in here and talk. It wasn't no precursor. Whoa. I know these are just lowly nigger women, and it's a shame we couldn't get no black dudes. I didn't hear none of that. Now, I heard the same thing I'm accustomed to hearing. They sold us into slavery. I heard. I didn't hear nobody in the crowd. Y'all didn't have no black dudes? Y'all don't have no black dudes? We just got to listen to all these old, no count black females? I'm ready to leave. They tricked us. I don't listen to no black. Where was that? Is she caping for the black dudes? You think Maya Angelou, she just retracted all that happened and she just left that all out? Like the prostitution things. And man, I don't want to be making my black dudes look bad and everything. We got black dude about to rape me in the hallway at the UN, so I'm going to leave that. Maybe she left all that out, maybe. I don't know, though. The other part, the going to the UN, all these demonstrations and such, where you could be killed. where you could be killed. There are armed white people. Minister Malcolm hadn't been assassinated at this point. Dr. King hadn't been assassinated. Medgar Evers hadn't been assassinated at this point. They could have been killed easily. Wouldn't have been, especially you storming the, oh my God, unruly. And black people would have come out because they did and said they deserved it. Radical hoodlums. Why are we doing, even what would success be exactly? So if this the best that we could possibly imagine, what would happen? We go in, we stand up, we're dignified. The white people apologize. They send a check to Lumumba's family. What, like, they would have to break that down. Like, that would have had to been, that would have, talking about not enough questions asked. Like, if it's going to be something where we might die, oh my goodness, there should be lots of questions. Now, what is supposed to be accomplished if we do this, quote unquote, successfully? Any sort of stand, that which I think she realized later, like, man, that sure was reckless, man. That raping black dude, I done risked his life. He could have been out raping, and I got him in here about to be killed, and then we didn't even, what is all this for? I don't know. Woo! That is, now that is a metaphor. She said, I don't even know if it's a metaphor, but that is black people. Poorly thought out, ill prepared, and generally just a lot of slow. In fact, I said, I'm going to have to dust off that Neely Fuller Jr. quote. He said, black culture is, I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. And that's what we have heard all throughout this book. I got to get me a teaspoon of drink. Even when they sit down and do something constructive. Anybody, you got something to drink? You got the brandy? Okay, let's sit down. What we going to do after you get a sip and all? Like, woo. Man, we even leaving Billie Holiday out of all this where this started at. But I mean, that, and I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. That includes sexual activity. That's what I mean. That's what we've heard for the whole book. I'm going to get me some stuff. And sometimes that also means I'm going to cut me a nigger. And we heard that too, the Savages. We heard that too. That is black culture. And that's Neely Fuller, the legend. That is direct quote. I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. And that's exactly what he said. That's the context too. That is, so when they say hip-hop music, Biz Markie, braids, cornrows, when they say that's spirituality, dancing, the electric slide, and most of that even would fall under the rubric of, I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. I guess if you put hair in for stuff, that is the totality of Negro culture, even into 2025. I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. And if it's Saturday, I'm black, I'm dangerous, and I got my stuff. And might even be extra dangerous if I didn't get my stuff. We will push off to audio segment number 2. See if we get some more name calling of white people. There's still no name calling, but man, I'm so accustomed to Coon and Sambo and Uncle Tom and Sellout and all the, like, wow, name calling white people. Wow. Wow. That doesn't solve any problems either. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, The Heart of a Woman, audio segment number 2.
Buddy ran down the steps. I heard him stop on the 9th floor, then his footsteps descended and stopped again and again. In a few seconds, he called, Sister Maya, come on. I got a door. Come on. I met him on the 6th floor landing. My heart was uttering so I could hardly catch my breath. The hallway and the elevator looked to me like Canada must have to escaping slaves. We were in the lobby before my embarrassment returned. My hand on his arm turned him around. Buddy, I apologize for panicking a while ago. I'm going to tell my husband about you. He looked at me and shook his head. Sister, in this country, a Negro is always about to get killed, so that ain't nothing. But you tell your husband that a black man was ready to lay down his life for you. That's all. He took my elbow and guided me past the still waiting police and to the door. I walked right into Rosa's arms. Girl, what happened? Carlos came out just after you went in. A bunch of us were getting ready to go get you. We hugged tightly. I said, Rosa, you've got to meet this brother. But when I turned to introduce Buddy, he had disappeared into the thinning crowd. Rosa continued, You were in there nearly 20 minutes. That was astounding news. I had been bold, blatant, and audacious. I had been silly, irresponsible, and unprepared. My body had been enclosed with panic and my mind immobilized with fear. A stranger had shown the courage of Vivian Baxter and the generosity of Jesus. And all that had happened in 20 minutes. Television and radio reporters were walking among the remaining protesters seeking interviews. One woman spoke into a microphone. Yes, we're mad. You people pick us off like we're jackrabbits. You dodged them right, we're mad. A man walking behind her added, Lumumba was in the Congo. The Congo is in Africa and we're Africans. You get that? C.O.W.S members had agreed to make no public statements, so we turned our faces when the journalists approached. The line of marchers was exhausted. People had begun to peel away. Their shoulders sagged and they walked heavily. They knew that their latest protest had done no good. They had been Joshua's band, shouting and screaming, singing and yelling at the walls, but Jericho had remained upright, unchanged. That night, I went to Rosa's for dinner and to watch the evening news. The cameras caught black bodies hurtling out of the UN doors and marchers chanting along 46th Street. Angry faces in profile glided across the screen, shouting accusations. When an unknown, well-dressed man came into view and speaking pompously said that he took full responsibility for the demonstration, Jean responded by calling him a sapsucker and turning on the television. The echo of the day's excitement and the wonder of C.O.W.H's power to bring all those people from Harlem kept us quiet for a few minutes. When conversation did return, we talked about our next moves. The day had proven that Harlem was in commotion and the rage was beyond the control of the NAACP, the SCLC, or the Urban League. The fury would turn on itself if it was not outwardly directed. There would be an increase of stabbings and shootings as black people assaulted each other, discharging tension and blindly looking for a surcease of pain lives. Rosa and I said, the black Muslims, and grinned because we thought alike and at the same time. Of course, the Muslims, with their exquisite discipline and their absolute stand on black-white relations, would know how to control and use the ferment in Harlem. We should go straight to Malcolm X and lay the situation in his lap. It would be interesting to see what he would do. And it would be a relief to shift the responsibility. The next day, Guy jumped with excitement. Mom, you're great. Really great. I wish I had been there. Boy, I wish I could have seen Stevenson's face. Boy, that's fantastic. John Killen's phone. Why didn't you let me know you people were going to have a riot? I'm always ready for a riot. You know that, Angel. When I explained that we had only expected a few people, he grunted and said we had fallen into the same trick bag whites are in. We underestimated the black community. 2 days later, Rosa and I walked into the Muslim restaurant. Making the appointment had been the easiest part. I simply telephoned the mosque and asked if Mr. Malcolm X could spare a half hour for the black ladies. After a brief pause, I was given a time and a place. Putting my thoughts in respectable order was more difficult because after I knew Malcolm would see us, I became appalled at our presumption. We told a waitress that we had come to see Mr. Malcolm X. She nodded and walked away, disappearing through a door at the end of the long counter. We stood nervously in the center of the room. In a moment, Malcolm appeared at the rear door. His aura was too bright and his masculine force affected me physically. A hot desert storm eddied around him and rushed to me, making my skin contract and my pores slam shut. He approached, and all my brain would do for me was record his coming. I had never been so affected by a human presence. Watching Malcolm X on television or even listening to him speak on a podium had been no preparation for meeting him face to face. Ladies, salam alaikum. His voice was black, baritone, and musical. Rosa shook hands, and I was able to nod dumbly. Up close, he was a great red arch through which one could pass to eternity. His hair was the color of burning embers, and his eyes pierced. He offered us a chair at a table and asked the nervous waitress for tea, which she brought in trembling cups. Rosa was more contained than I, so she began explaining our mission. The sound of her voice helped me to shake loose the constriction of muteness. I joined the telling, and we distributed our story equally, like the patter of a longtime vaudeville duo. We, C.O.W.S, Cultural Association of Women of African Heritage, wanted to protest the murder of Lumumba, so we planned a small demonstration. We didn't expect more than 50 people, and thousands came. That told us that the people of Harlem are angry and that they are more for Africa and Africans than they ever let on. Malcolm was leaning back in his chair, his chin tilted down, his attention totally ours. He straightened abruptly. We know of the demonstration, but Muslims were not involved. New York Times reporters telephoned me, and I told them Muslims do not demonstrate, and I'll tell you this, you were wrong. Rosa and I looked at each other. Malcolm X, as the most radical leader in the country, was our only hope, and if he didn't approve of our action, then maybe we had misunderstood everything. You were wrong in your direction. He continued speaking and looking straight into our eyes. The people of Harlem are angry, and they have reason to be angry. But going to the United Nations, shouting and carrying placards will not win freedom for anyone, nor will it keep the white devils from killing another African leader, or a black American leader. But Rosa was getting angry. What were we supposed to do? Nothing? I don't agree with that. She had more nerve than I. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that integration is a trick to lull the black man to sleep. We must separate ourselves from the white man, this immoral white man and his white religion. It is a hypocrisy practiced by Christian hypocrites. He continued, white Christians were guilty. Portuguese Catholic priests had sprinkled holy water on slave ships, entreating God to give safe passage to the crews and cargoes on journeys across the Atlantic. American slave owners had used the Bible to prove that God wanted slavery, and even Jesus Christ had admonished slaves to render unto their masters obedience. As long as the black man looked to the white man's God for his freedom, the black man would remain enslaved. I tried not to show my disappointment. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Mr. X. Oh, I don't know your last name. I mean, how should you be addressed? I am Minister Malcolm. My last name is Shabazz, but just call me Minister Malcolm. Rosa had stood, irritation on her face. Malcolm said, I know you're disappointed. His voice had softened, and for a time the Islamic preacher disappeared. I'll tell you this. By 12 o'clock, some Negro leaders are going to be like Peter in your Christian Bible. They will deny you. There will be statements given to the press, not only refuting what you did, but they will add that you are dangerous and probably communists. Those Negroes, he said the word sarcastically, think they're different from you and that the white man loves them for their difference. They will sell you again and again into slavery. Now, here's what we, the Nation of Islam, will not do. We will not ask the people of Harlem to march anywhere at any time. We will not send black men and black women and black children before armed and crazy white devils, and we will not deny you. We will do the things. We will offer them the religion of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we will make a statement to the press. I will say that yesterday's demonstration is symbolic of the anger in this country. That black people were saying they will not always say yes, sir, and please, sir, and they will not always allow whites to spit on them at lunch counters in order to eat hot dogs and drink Coca-Colas. He stood. Our audience was over. Suddenly, he was aloof and cool, his energy withdrawn. He said, "Salam alaikum," and turned to join a few men who had been waiting for him at the counter. We left the restaurant in a fog of defeat. Black despair was still real. The murders would continue, and we had just used up our last resource. When Rosa and I embraced at the subway, there was no elation in our parting. That evening, the radio, television, and newspapers bore out Malcolm's predictions. Conservative black leaders spoke out against us. That ugly demonstration was carried out by an irresponsible element and does not reflect the mood of the larger black community. No good can come from yesterday's blatant disrespect at the UN. It was undignified and unnecessary. Malcolm X was as good as his word. He said, "Black people are letting white Americans know that the time is coming for ballots or bullets. They know it is useless to ask their enemy for justice. And surely whites are the enemies of blacks. Otherwise, how did we get to this country in the first place?" Chapter 12. Vuz was back in New York, a little heavier and more distracted. He said the Indian curries had been irresistible, and his meeting succeeded but raised new questions which he had to handle at once. He was out of the house early and came home long after dark. Guy was engaged in the mysteries which surround 15-year-old boys, the cunning way girls were made, the delicious agony of watching them walk, the painful knowledge that not one of the beauteous creatures would allow herself to be held and touched. Except for the refrigerator, the telephone was his only important link to life. One morning, I realized that weeks had passed since I had participated in a conversation with anyone. When Max invited me over to read a script with Abby, I accepted gladly. He had composed the music for Gene Jennings' play The Blacks, which was to open off Broadway in the late spring. When I walked into their apartment, a small group of musicians was tuning up beside the piano. I was introduced to the production team. Sidney Bernstein, the producer, was a frail little man who sat smiling timidly, his eyes wandering the room unfocused. The energetic and intense director, Gene Frankel, snapped his head from right to left and back again in small jerks, reminding me of a predatory bird perched on a high blue. The stage manager, Max Glanville, a tall, sturdy black man, was at ease in the room. He sat composed while his colleagues twitched. When Frankel said he was ready to hear the music, there was impatience in his voice. Sidney smiled and said there was plenty of time. Abby and I sat opposite each other holding copies of the marked script. We divided the roles evenly, and when the music began, we read, sometimes against the music, over it, or waited in intervals as the notes took center stage. Neither of us was familiar with the play, and since its structure was extremely complex and its language convoluted, we read in monotones, not even trying to make dramatic sense. Finally, we reached the last notes. The evening had seemed to be endless. Gene Frankel was the oss to stand. He rushed up to Max, took his hand, looked deep into his eyes. Great, great, just great. We've got to be going. Okay. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Great reading. Frankel turned around like a kitten trying to catch its tail. Okay, Sidney, let's go. Glanville. He turned again. Musicians? Oh yeah, thanks, guys. Great. In a second, he was at the door, his hand on the knob. Sidney went to the musicians, shaking hands, giving each a bit of a wispy grin. He thanked Max and Abby and me. The music was perfect. Glanville looked at his white partners slyly and smiled at us. His leer said he was leaving with them only because he had to, and we would understand. Okay, folks. Thanks. Thanks, Max. We'll be talking to you. When the door closed behind them, I laughed, partly out of relief. Max asked what was funny. I said the play and the producers. You mean you didn't understand it? All of a sudden, he was angry and he began to shout at me. He said The Blacks was not only a good play, it was a great play. It was written by a white Frenchman who had done a lot of time in prison. Jennett understood the nature of imperialism and colonialism and how those two evils erode the natural good in people. It was important that our people see the play. Every black in the United States should see it. Furthermore, as a black woman married to a South African and raising a black boy, I should damn well understand the play before I started laughing at it. And as for ridiculing the white men, at least they were going to put the play on, and all I could do was laugh at them. I ought to have better sense. The musicians made a lot of noise packing up their instruments. Abby sat quiet, looking at Max. I got up and gathered my purse. I wanted at least to reach the door before the tears fell. Good night, Abby called. Thanks, Maya. Thanks for reading. I was nearly at the elevator before I heard a door and Max's voice at the same time. Maya, wait. He walked toward me. I thought that he was sorry to have spoken so harshly. Take this. He handed me a wrapped package. Read it. He was nearly barking. Read it, understand it, then see if you'll laugh. I took the manuscript and he spun around and went back into his apartment. Vu studied political releases, Guy did schoolwork, and I read The Blacks. During the third reading, I began to see through the tortuous and mythical language, and the play's meaning became clear. Jennett suggested that colonialism would crumble from the weight of its ignorance, its arrogance and greed, and that the oppressed would take over the positions of their former masters. They would be no better, no more courageous, and no more merciful. I disagreed. Black people could never be like whites. We were different, more respectful, more merciful, more spiritual. Whites irresponsibly sent their own aged parents to institutions to be cared for by strangers and to die alone. We generously kept old aunts and uncles, grandparents and great-grandparents at home, feeble but needed, senile but accepted as natural parts of natural families. Our mercy was well known. During the 30s Depression, white hobos left freight trains and looked for black neighborhoods. They would appear hungry at the homes of the last hired and the first read and were never turned away. The migrants were given cold biscuits, leftover beans, grits, and whatever black folks could spare. For centuries we tended and nursed, often at our breasts, the children of people who despised us. We had cooked the food of a nation of racists, and despite the many opportunities, there were few stories of black servants poisoning white families. If that didn't show mercy, then I misunderstood the word. As for spirituality, we were Christians. We demonstrated the teachings of Christ. We turned other cheeks so often our heads seemed to revolve on the end of our necks like old stop-and-go signs. How many times should we forgive? Jesus said 7 times 70. We forgave as if forgiving was our talent. Our church music showed that we believed there was something greater than we, something beyond our physical selves, and that something, that God and his son, Jesus, were always present and could be called in the midnight hour and talked to when the sun raised itself to walk across the morning sky. We could sing the angels out of heaven and bring them to stand thousands thronged on the head of a pin. We could ask Jesus to be on hand to walk around our deathbeds and gather us into the bosom of Abraham. We told him all about our sorrows and relished the time when we would be counted among numbers of those who would go marching in. We would walk the golden streets of heaven, eat of the milk and honey, wear the promised shoes, and rest in the arms of Jesus, who would rock us and say, "You have labored in my vineyard. You are tired. You are home now, child. Well done." Oh, there was no doubt that we were spiritual. The blacks was a white foreigner's idea of a people he did not understand. Jennett had superimposed the meanness and cruelty of his own people onto a race he had never known, a race already nearly doubled over carrying the white man's burden of greed and guilt, and which at the same time toted its own insufficiency. I threw the manuscript into a closet, finished with Jennett and his narrow little conclusions.
Katherine Massey Book Club. We will pick back up next Thursday. Man, It is so. I said the metronome context of white supremacy. I'd never heard of this play. Never. Just when we started reading this book, I was able to find newspaper reports from this time period where they talk about this play and Dr. Maya Angelou being in this play, even with the late Louis Gossett Jr. and the late James Earl Jones. But they talk about her being in this play. Literally, days ago, the California wildfire. Dr. Angelou also lived in Los Angeles. She told us that in this book. Went to the party down in Beverly Hills. Pool party. Said she looked better than Marilyn Monroe. One of the victims of the wildfires in California, Altadena, Dulcie Curry, Mama D, she also was in the play The Blacks. Same time period. She just didn't do the version in New York City. She was on the West Coast, L.A., but stunning. I couldn't even believe it that popped up, because I think I saw that first, that Mama D, Miss Curry, 95-year-old black female victim of the California wildfires. But I saw her, and she was not left alone. Her family was mortified by her death. Anyway, but I just saw and was reading about her, and they were saying she's a part of old black Hollywood, and a part of that was the play The Blacks. And then Dr. Maya Angelou was in this play, and that's a big. She was in the play, same play, and then her talking about this play is a big part of the book. Stunning. I might have to see if the play is online. Maybe I can watch a version. Maybe I watch a version with Mama D in it or Miss Curry. Just wacky. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. Let's see, folks who dialed in, if you have commentary, observations to share, star 61, we'll get your commentary on the line. Let's see. Octavius in New York should be with us. Lauren as well.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir. Octavius in New York.
Yeah, and the first thing I'd start off with is, in my book, it's 207, when she speaks to the Honorable Malcolm X. This passage reads, he continued, white Christians were guilty. Portuguese Catholic priests had sprinkled holy water on slave ships, entreating God to give safe passage to crews and cargoes on journeys across the Atlantic. American slave owners had used the Bible to prove that God wanted slavery, and even Jesus Christ had admonished slaves to render unto their masters obedience. As long as the black man looked to the white man's God for his freedom, the black man would remain enslaved. I like this passage because he's dealing with the religious aspect of slavery, and I love the fact that just a few pages down, then Maya Angelou in page 212 in the next chapter speaks about the author of this play, the blacks, and that's the last segment we just finished listening to, that the blacks was the white foreigner's idea of people he did not understand, had superimposed the meanness and cruelty of his own people onto a race he had never known, a race already nearly doubled over, carrying the white man's burden, greed, guilt, which at the same time toted its inefficiency. I threw the manuscript into a closet, finished with Get and his narrow little conclusions. And then she goes on to speak in regards to religious aspects as far as like black people in general. And I think that's really interesting, the contrast where they literally just finished speaking to Malcolm X, and he spoke in regards to Christianity and the Bible. And then right back, she brings it up as a means to kind of defend black people and uses the Bible herself in that aspect where, you know, we demonstrated the teachings of Christ. We turned our cheeks so often, our heads seemed to revolve on the end of our necks like old stop and go signs. Like, man. So I thought that aspect was really serious. I think she did a good job there. And as far as the writing, I don't know if she meant to do that, but that contrast really stands out in that chapter for me. That being said, for me, I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, Octavius in New York. A foreigner writing a play about people he does not understand. That is a curious way of, I guess, explaining that white people are ignorant or confused somehow about racism. Always. I do not agree. Anywho, let's see. Other folks who dialed in. Lauren, if you have commentary, proceed.
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I actually had a part from the last section that I didn't talk about. Hold on. I am looking for it. It was when they started singing. And they started singing, and before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. And this part made me think to myself, a Christian God isn't even our God. That's white people's God, or what they pretend is their God. I don't know. Maybe that's racism, white supremacy, or them. But they gave us that idea. It just helps them to dominate and or subjugate us. It's all that to say, it's not our God. Let me see. I'm not sure if I said this last time, but when the guy told the law enforcement officer, nah, we ain't got no damn permit, so you better pull out your pistols and start shooting. Shoot us down now because we ain't moving. That probably was not the most constructive thing to say in that instance. Let me see. Again, I kind of reread that section of when Miss Angelou and the black male who told her to call him buddy. I reread that, and I really I didn't see at what point that white woman thought that Buddy might rape her. She said, I expected to see disgust or at least derision on my accomplice's face, but he displayed no emotion. All right, sister, let's go. We walked back down to the 10th floor, and I pushed the door, but it resisted. I must have gasped because he pushed me aside and grabbed the knob. Let me do it. He took the knob, leaned his body against the metal panel, but the door wouldn't give. Panic accelerated my blood. Like an idiot, I had given myself to death. The cops would open the door any minute and blow my brains out. No one would see and no one would be able to protect me. Now, she's obviously fearful of these white people. I don't see, like, at what point you start to be worried. If that was even true, I don't know if she lied or if that's just how her twisted mind works. But I don't see at what point you start to be worried about getting raped by this person who is helping you. Let me see. I think it was nice that she apologized for panicking. But the panicking, I guess that was understandable. We talked about the sapsucker thing. And somewhere in here, I'm not looking right at it, but she said something about the law enforcement officers being confused. But then she said, when I explained that we'd only expected a few people, he grunted and said we'd fallen into the same trick bag whites are in. We underestimated the black community. And I don't think white people underestimate black people. I think they pay attention to, know, and understand more about us than we do ourselves, like collectively, right? When she was describing Malcolm X, now maybe she was just in awe of him. I think he was a very admirable person, but she said his aura was too bright and his masculine force affected me physically. A hot desert storm eddied around him and rushed to me, making my skin contract and my pores slam shut. He approached, and all my brain would do for me was record his coming. I had never been so affected by human presence. Now, she has described the way she felt when, she first met other males, and it seemed like sexual. Somehow this seemed similar, but not the same. It didn't seem sexual. She just seemed to be really in awe of and impressed by him. Now, I don't know if I'm misreading that, so if someone else disagrees, let me know what you think, but that isn't how I took it. The last caller read another part that I highlighted, so I appreciate that. Okay. The part about that play, and she said I disagreed. Black people could never be like whites. We were different, more respectful, more merciful, more spiritual. Whites irresponsibly sent their own aged parents to institutions to be cared for by strangers and to die alone. We generously kept old aunts and uncles, grandparents, and great-grandparents at home, feeble but needed, senile but accepted as natural parts of natural families. Our mercy was well known. During the 30s Depression, white hobos left freight trains and looked for black neighborhoods. They would appear hungry at the homes of the last hired and the first fired and were never turned away. The migrants were given cold biscuits, leftover beans, grits, and whatever black folks could spare. For centuries, we tended and nursed, often at our breast, the children of people who despised us. We had cooked the food of a nation of racists, and despite many opportunities, there were few stories of black servants poisoning white families. If that didn't show mercy, then I misunderstood the word. I don't have a lot of notes about that section. I just think it was important because I think the very nature of a white person, I think it was in that book, the Iceman Inheritance by Michael Bradley. I think there was a line in that book where he said, our very nature is treacherous. And I think that is not necessarily true about the people, non-white people in general, black people specifically. Now, I'm not saying we don't engage in incorrect behavior, but lots of it was learned from white people. And so I thought it was important, when she said Jeanette had, or Janae, I don't know, had superimposed the meanness and cruelty of its own people onto a race well, not a race, a group of people he had never known, a race already nearly doubled over, carrying the white man's burden of greed and guilt, and which at the same time toted its own insufficiency. I threw the manuscript in the closet, finished with Janae and his narrow little conclusion. I think, it's something that white people think about quite a bit. They know the kinds of things that they've done to us, and they are concerned that maybe there will come a day when we do these sorts of things to them. But I really just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's like she said, we're not like white people. And yeah, that's all I have for this segment. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Lauren. I found the spot. So when Buddy, when he's taking her and he says, "Sister, in this country, a Negro is always about to get killed, so that ain't nothing. But you tell your husband that a black man was ready to lay down his life for you. That's all. He took my elbow." I said, there it is, right there. He's fitting to do some raping. He's grabbed up. He's fitting to snatch her and run off in the alley. "Ah, come here, black woman. Nah, I'm going to go and hop on you." It didn't strike you as he was fitting to do some raping when he grabbed her elbow? Got a strange thug?
No.
All right. Well, I don't grab nobody's elbow. Being a black male myself, you might be in trouble. Let's see. I found one, and there are others, but one of the reports. Now, I have some of the reports where they're talking about Dr. Maya Angelou in the play The Blacks. I guess I'll have to go back and look at some of those too. But this is from, make sure I give you the source. This is from the Hollywood Reporter archive, February 21. That's goofy. 1962. Goofy. Minister Malcolm X would be killed on that date 3 years later. This is Legit Bits. The Blacks, a new play by Jean Genet, opening March 13 at the Ivar Theater, is now completely cast and in rehearsal. Featured in the play are Morris Buchanan, Dulcie Curry, again, she's one of the black victims in the recent California wildfires. She was killed at 95, almost made it to 100 years old. Bob DeCoy, Ivan Dixon. I nearly passed out as I read that again, like, oh my goodness. Ivan Dixon co-starred with Abby Lincoln in the film Nothing But a Man. Matter of fact, rewind. Whoop, whoop, whoop. All that talk about Lorraine Hansberry. I played Raisin in the Sun. Ivan Dixon is in Raisin in the Sun. He's the African boy. Louis Gossett Jr. Is in Raisin in the Sun. Matter of fact, he's in the sound clip that I play. Brother, black brother, hell. That's Louis Gossett Jr. So lots of the people that we have heard about in this book, they are in these works, seminal works, and these kind of are all different versions of Porgy and Bess. Black people who are poor and don't have anything. Now, I have not seen the play The Blacks. I have seen Raisin in the Sun, poor black people in Chicago. But all these plays are basically poor victims of white supremacy who are classified as black, who have nothing, sing songs, name call other black people. The play or movie or whatever ends and they still have nothing, and they're happy about that. And maybe they sing some songs about it or whatever, dance about it, whatever the case may be. But I have to see like what all happens in the like if they're in prison or anything like that, then yeah. Anywho, let's see. So that's one. Let me go back, get a few of my notes in before we. Oh, let me finish the email. Number one. Email number 1.5, Malcolm appeared at the rear door. You were wrong in your direction. Going to the United Nations, shouting and carrying placards will not win freedom for anyone. Some Negro leaders are going to be like Peter in your Christian Bible. They will deny you. Malcolm is one of the few non-white people in the text who seems to have a clearer understanding of the global system of racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. I would agree. 12. Number 1. Max Glanville asked what was funny. I said the play and the producers. You mean you didn't understand it? All of a sudden he was angry and he began to shout at me. It was a great play, written by a white Frenchman. Genet suggested that colonialism would crumble from the weight of its ignorance. The blacks was a white foreigner's idea of people. Never heard of this play, but my impression from the text, it seems that the suspected racist playwright intentionally wrote it in a way to generate a lot of conflict and confusion among non-white victims. The fact that it was written by a so-called Frenchman may have played a role in convincing non-white victims that it was intellectually important. The play's full title is The Blacks, a Clown Show. Now that's important if that's like the subtitle. Whew, that's what, he's not confused. He knows exactly what he's talking about with niggers, clowns. 2. The root cause of racism and its primary result is that whites refuse to see us as people. But the play says, given the chance, black people will act as cruel as whites. I don't believe it. More confusion and conflict resulting from this play. Let's see. And I don't think we got that far. Yep, we didn't get that far. We'll have to come back and pick up there next week, and we will get more Porgy and Bess. Alrighty, we'll pause there. I'll get some of my notes in before we wrap up. Now that we've heard the entirety of the section with Buddy, the random thug at the UN, I'm even more appalled because, again, this black dude could have been killed easily that day. Easily. And we wouldn't even know his name. Just be, thug, potential rapist, shot dead after terrorizing good white people at the UN, Wouldn't even have a grave marker or anything where he's buried at. But he's still a rapist. In this, where Dr. Angelou is saying, like, oh my goodness, it's so poorly thought out, reckless, half shaved and grinning. As he's saying, like, man, but that's not how this white woman is reading the book at all. And again, like, she's sitting, oh, I forgot. Whew. Gus T, since we're doing our Bay Area, Jim Jones, San Francisco, I'm going to put my Steph Curry. You can just leave that. I said, so that was Terry Gross, 1981, November 18, 1981, suspected racist Terry Gross talking to Maya Angelou. Was Buddy fixing to rape you? Ooh, I thought he was about to rape you. Fast forward to 2015. Yes, it's Terry Gross talking to the late Toni Morrison. Her book, I think it's God Bless the Child. And Toni Morrison is talking about her black dad, probably a rapist, that a white man was messing with her, and her black dad went and beat him up and threw him down the stairs. And Terry Gross is, oh, I was disturbed about that. Like, your dad throwing a white man down the steps. I thought he was going to go out and rape someone. Toni Morrison checked her so hard, and she got this. Yes, that was Terry Gross. What does it mean to be white? Let's see. That was a great question, I thought, that Lauren asked about how many hotels were there present in Harlem at that time, since Abby Lincoln is complaining about black people meeting at white spaces and hotels to grouse about white people. Great point by Abby Lincoln, and then great point. So are there black hotels available to do this? I was thinking the Teresa Hotel in Harlem, because that's where Castro met with Malcolm X and on. I said, well, wait a minute. Does a black person own that? It seems no. So I don't know. That, might be a great question. Maybe there aren't even black-owned hotels where this could be had. I guess maybe they could have had it at the bookstore, but they might not even have room for such. So that again, now, I mean, wow. System of white supremacy. We don't even have space to go and complain and or strategize about racism. We have to rent space from whitey. Pitiful. It would seem like a church, though. You had black churches, right? Seemed like they could have been in a church. I don't know. Maybe logistically that wouldn't have worked either. Let's see. I thought it was interesting because Malcolm X eventually did evolve to we should go to the UN with a report, legal complaint of or legal charge of genocide. That was and I mean quickly, because this is like 61 and he died in 65. So I mean in a matter of like 4 years, he quickly evolved. I mean that is substantially different than going just to shout and with placards, but yes, we should go to the UN and charge genocide. Let's see. Black people trained to die. That is absolutely true. And to be reckless with our lives in a variety of ways. We heard that with the savages and reckless with sexual. I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. That is absolutely true. Even to this day, 2025, dispensaries on every corner and liquor and all the rest of it. CTE, football, all that. Let's see. The female voices shot up like arrows over the crowd. Tell these fools, Brother Malcolm, tell them to stop acting like little boys. Not men, not women, boys and gals. Yes, yes. Some of you think there are good whites, don't you? Some good white folks you've worked for or worked with or went to school with or even married, don't you? Yes, we do, Minister Malcolm, even in, or especially in 2025. You better not nary come out here trying to talk about white supremacy, racism, and act like there aren't lots of good white folks. In fact, not all white people is racist. And hey, even Minister Malcolm renounced this. That is how powerful that ideology is. Even Minister Malcolm would later renounce this. El Hajj Malik Shabazz. We read that too. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Many people have been pointing this out now. I'm glad. I don't even remember who to credit with, but many folks have been pointing out like, dang, they do a lot of drinking in this here book. Yes, they do. So they are listening to Minister Malcolm speaking and talking about all this, and wow, this ain't no good white people. You mean all white people is racist? Whoa, that's heavy. I'm out there. This dude is crazy. Ooh. So this is we walk without speaking to Frank's restaurant. Again, there was no need to talk. Malcolm's words were harsh. What does that mean? But too close to the bitter truth to argue. Our people were alone, as always, alone. We could not expect protection from whites, even if they happen to be our relatives. Who is she talking about exactly? Does she have a white relative? Did I miss a character? Is she talking about her ex-husband? Like, if he's ex, is that still your relative? I mean, the ex is there for a who is? Never mind. Like, but I mean, to me, that's significant. Does she have a white relative? Who are you talking about? Let's see. Our people were alone. If they happen to be our relatives, slave-owning fathers had sold black sons and daughters. White sisters had put their black sisters in slave coffins for a price. Rosa and I drank at the bar. May do get to, what can we do? Even, that might even be something to think about. They're having a sip at the bar where they think we should go and march on the UN. It'll be dramatic. Now, maybe if they had been seated at a study room at the library. They don't have black-owned facilities, so we'll go to the library. We go to the library, we get a study room, we get a dry erase board, and we think, same question, what should we do? Go to the UN. Okay, we go to the UN to do what? We stand. Okay, we stand. Now, what is this supposed to accomplish? We will... That's a good question. We'll have to think on. See, maybe maybe it doesn't. Maybe they come up with the exact same plan. But it is and even, hey, that is black culture. I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. It can't just be we're going to go, and it could have just been we're going to go and eat. We're going to go and cook. Billie Holiday, we had the chicken. We're going to go, we'll cook, and we'll think about what he said. No, we got to go get, what he said was so harsh, we got to go and get, some Thunderbird. Like, really? Come on. We can do it. I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. Let's see. Even it's so ubiquitous. So then they get to thinking on what we gonna do, and blah, blah, blah. Abby brought brandy and we got down to business. Do we have to have liquor to get down to business? I mean, dang, I know white people do a lot of, happy hour meetings and all that, but I mean, come on. I mean, just come on. We could do better, folks. 2025, we should be, sobriety would be best so that we can have excellent working brain computers. Let's see. Move forward, get a few of my thoughts in from the last chapter after Buddy. I guess, if anything, I'll get to this part where she disagrees from the play The Blacks, where she says, I don't agree. Blacks, we're not the same as whites. Now, hey, we are not the same. They are not like us in a myriad of ways, some for the good, some for the bad. But either way, we are not the same. Now, that's it. Man, I don't exactly know what people mean when they say black people are spiritual. That's one that ends up on the board often when black culture, braiding hair, Diddy, hip-hop, Grandmaster Flash, breakdancing, preaching, poetry, that sort of thing. That these types of things will be mentioned. I don't really know what black spirituality means, and I certainly do not translate that to any sort of black people are less cruel than white people, because I would take a gander now. Rwanda did happen, yes. White people most to blame, for sure, and white people have books written, but I mean, hey, at the end of the day, Rwanda did happen. We don't have a problem, for the most part, in this book about black people name-calling white people, even though we did get a teaspoon. It's a lot of black people name-calling other black people, which continues right on 2025. Not to mention the savages. That don't sound nothing like spirituality, and that sounded kind of widespread. Like, it didn't sound like when she was talking about the psychology of these worthless black dudes, it didn't sound like this was an anomaly and maybe just over here. It sounded kind of widespread. And then I come back with what everyone, well, I won't say everyone, but many people have pointed out. All this drinking does not strike me as we are a spiritual people. All this, I got to go and be smoking on cigarettes all the time and reefer and have a sip of this and a glass of this before we can even sit down and do anything. That's not spiritual. That's not the way that Minister Malcolm X, when he put down Detroit Red, he put down the reefer. When he became a minister, then a part of his spiritual practice was, I don't do all that. I don't hang out at the juke joint. I don't do all that. Well, we going to the mosque. Well, let me get a drink so I can't get on my, whitey devil sermon unless I hadn't had a sip. I got to, have a puff, be like Dave Chappelle. I got to have a cigarette while I do. It was the exact opposite. So it's hard for me to reconcile. Hey, even I have been told as a certified yoga instructor, the practice of yoga is spiritual. Not all yogis are into being vegan and all that, but that is a component of the traditional yoga practice, is not do no harm. And many folks say, hey, that extends to your plate. You shouldn't be harming other animals and all of that, so that should be reflected. And you do end up with a lot of people who practice yoga who are vegans, yours truly included. But I mean, whatever you mean by being spiritual, if black culture was about spirituality, man, that would not be reflected in, I'm going to get me some stuff today. It would not be reflected that way at all. And it's certainly, our spirituality is not reflected in how we treat other black people. And that was even more stark when she got to talking that about, man, look how spiritual we is. We got, even you can contrast now. Malcolm X says, yes, look at how spiritual we're going to be when we come out and talk about how radical and uncouth we were to go and do that at the UN. She goes and picks, look at us. We done turned the other cheek. Look at us. And we have fed our enemies and loved them with these poor migrants and yum, yum, yum and all that. OMG. I just contrast, like, we're spiritual because of how we treat our enemies. How do we treat other black people? Do we see that spirituality pop out with other? Now, if you're going to tell me, buddy, okay, but that doesn't seem like common. I'm not saying we all out to rape. Lord, I'm not agreeing with that, but man, what about the savages? What about before you got engaged to Vooz? You were with Thomas. I thought that was the fiancé. What's spiritual about that? I'm with one dude, and just flitty about it at the drop of a hat. Or, whoa, that's a good looking man. Is that our spirituality being reflected? Nah. I think if we were more spiritual, whatever that means, we would have solved this problem. At least it wouldn't be so hard to get. Can we stop name calling? If we're so spiritual, maybe we stop name calling our black brothers and sisters. Maybe we don't. Yeah. That Diddy is a coon, and I got it. I just don't see that reflected, and I know, or I won't say I know, but for me that is significant. She didn't pivot to how we treat other black people. She pivoted to how we treat white people in spite of. I don't even think that's good evidence, because white people have the capacity to do us great harm. It might be a good thing to take care of a white person. Maybe that'll create me some favor. Like, hoo-hoo, I looked out for a white person. Woohoo. And in fact, I even forgot, we are the biography kings. We have heard this before. Madiba, Long Walk to Freedom. Brother say, Gus, why don't you put that back up in the archives? Because it's like 20 sections. Like, I would need a whole 2 weeks of just do nothing so I could put all that back up. But in Long Walk to Freedom, Madiba, I had to change my highlighter color. He has a section where he passes a bedraggled, just like she described, bedraggled down and out white person. And Madiba said, oh my goodness, what can we do? Can we get in my last lima bean? Ooh. And he hooked up. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. And then he stopped later on and he said, now wait a minute. I have passed bedraggled and down and out black people all the time, and I do not bat an eyelash. What is up with that? That's white supremacy racism. And Man, I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, I'm paraphrasing like a half a teaspoon. That's how I'm reading. Like, man, the way we have been conditioned, that's white Jesus, isn't it? That's Dylan Roof is white Jesus. That's what I thought of too. Like, that's Dylan Roof. Come on in, my white brother. Come on in. All are welcome. That's white Jesus. We're going to get you to the manger, white Jesus. That's how we've been conditioned with that very book, with that very religion of white supremacy. So, of course, we had better take care of that white person. Now, Leroy, on the other hand, I don't know. And in fact, I could just leave the contrast because she already told us. Now, white enemy, she told us, turn the other cheek. We do it so much on a swivel, right? Did they turn the other cheek with the savages? That almost feel kind of mic droppish. That's what I'm talking about. Like, nah, man, I reject that. Just what I keep saying about black people. Like, oh my God, black culture is the worst thing ever. Like, it's kind of, it reeks of like trying to put some dignity on all this. Ain't nothing spiritual about being a victim of white supremacy. You get thrown in jail and anally raped. Didn't she bring that out of the book? I can't believe I was going to wrap up and not say that. Didn't she talk about that? You could be a male or female and get thrown in jail and anally raped. What's spiritual about that? Madiba talked about getting thrown in jail and pissed on. What's spiritual about that? Maya Angelou got raped. What's spiritual about that? I don't agree with none of that. If we were really that spiritual, we wouldn't have to beg, hey, can you please stop calling your black brother a coon? Anywho, I don't remember doing no nonviolence and we got to turn the other cheek with the savages. She got a pistol and I'm going to go threaten these niggers. She didn't call them niggers, but she sure enough said she got that pistol. She didn't get a gun for the white people. It's been a lot of white abuse all the way back to Arkansas, unless I have really messed up on my reading. Did they go get a pistol to deal with some white people about Lumumba? Pistol to deal with about getting evicted? Savage. That was an 18-year-old. That was a black. I'm sorry. That's probably a rapist too, so I shouldn't be snickering. Any hoodles. We will get back to it. You all can think about that, though. I don't know what that means, though. Black spiritual. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means. We will be here for Neutralizing Workplace Racism on Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Compensatory call-in Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. For this book, man, Negro culture is, per Neely Fuller Jr., I'm going to get me some stuff tonight. Sobriety would be best. Protect your brain computer. Maybe even do better. We'll do better thinking towards solving this problem if we are sober when we get to thinking. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling black people. No name calling black people. What is a sapsucker? I don't even know what that is. Like, If you called me on, I don't know what a coon is either. Like a lot of these, a sellout. It's a whole lot of these names. I don't know what that is, but a sapsucker. Like, what is that? Sapsucker. I have to write that down. Sapsucker. No name calling black people. No gossiping. No throwaway offspring. Cows signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.